What is happening out there, rotoscouts baseball fans? Welcome to the Wednesday show, gang. Hump day. Just realized it was Wednesday as I was saying that. Interesting little slate we've got on our hands tonight. 7-gamer. No real sure things going on the mound, despite some very, very high-end pitchers taking the mound. Just some tough matchups. Some weird little value spots to talk our way through. Should be a really interesting slate, but hopefully you guys are all doing well out there as we hit the middle of the week. Hopefully the work week hasn't been too bad. Starting to make plans for the weekend. As we always say, 3:30 on a Wednesday afternoon, you're basically at the weekend already, right? Check out of the Wednesday. All the work is probably done by now. Excuse me. All the work is probably done by now. Hit a little happy hour, whatever you're doing on Wednesday nights. Thursday's basically the weekend already. Friday is definitely the weekend. Who works on Fridays? That's it. Congrats, gang. You made it again. So welcome to the show. Ducking is here. Ducking's looking for the W tonight. Good luck back to you, buddy. A couple of people here hanging out. Light turnout so far in the first, minute or so of the show. I think everybody kind of knows that this one doesn't really start on time all that frequently. We typically get people trickling in, but let's see who arrives. In the meantime, I might as well pull up the board here. There's Cujo. I was looking for Cujo. How's the week going, buddy? Hope you're doing well. There's our pitching board. Interesting little 7-gamer. Just a public service announcement. The slate does start at 6:35 today, so make sure that it is 6:35, right? As I'm saying that. Yeah, 6:35 on both sites. So make sure that you got your lineups in, and we'll be out in plenty of time. 7 games, we're going to breeze on through it. Breeze in our sense. But we'll get through it in plenty of time. We'll get the updates up on the site, and we'll get this thing rocking and rolling. So a lot to talk about on this one. Aaron Davis didn't play Adames or Pham in the afternoon slate. Ouch. It sounds like it's going good for Cujo, though. So some good, some bad there. Sorry to hear that, Aaron. I haven't seen what either of those players have done. I saw that Byron Buxton came out of his game, which sucks, especially after Trout. Rip Mike Trout going up for knee surgery, torn meniscus, I think it was, in the knee. That just sucks. As I said to my buddies Lou and Mike on our group text just before when the Buxton news broke, Buxton, you kind of expect that. He was already hurt briefly earlier in the season, and just he hasn't been performing really. Whereas Mike Trout was off to such a good start with a hey, I'm not dead yet, remember me kind of a year. It was so nice to see. So that just feels so much more tragic than the Buxton one. I guess I'm just more used to Buxton being banged up, or I just care less. I'm not sure. I love Buxton. I think he's a tremendous, tremendous talent when he's healthy and on the field. It's been more rare. We've seen less of Buxton over the years. And I'm just a sucker for Trout. What am I going to say? But yeah, that one sucked. But sounds like Adames went off, and I guess Pham did too. Interesting for the White Sox. I had some Adames last night. He came through in that Brewer stack that I was talking about. They got there, but I had some of the wrong pieces. The Twins kind of got there a little bit, but not really. They under-delivered. The Astros, our top team, had a big game. Hot and cold with the pitching. A lot of the pitchers we liked succeeded. We didn't quite get there with Spencer Turnbull. He turned in a great performance, but he got yanked after, I think it was 5 2/3, 5 1/3, 5 2/3. So he came up short of the quality start just because, I don't know, the manager just doesn't seem to like him. He put one guy on base, and all of a sudden he got the hook. And then there was an error, and then some of the runs scored. The inherited run scored, but it didn't count as earned runs against him, but counted for them not getting the win bonus. So it basically cost him 10 points just with one shitty decision. He was pitching really well. Would have left him in to let him get through that inning. Anyway, so that one didn't go great, but good night overall last night in terms of what we talked about on the show. So hopefully there's some successful lineups out there. Lead off Tyrone Taylor. That is interesting. We'll get there. Let me grab that lineup since it seems to have dropped. Not yet on Labs, of course. All right, we'll just keep an eye out for that one as we get to that game. Taylor Marte, Lindor, Alonso, JD Martinez, Jeff McNeil, Harrison Bader, Brett Beatty, and Tomas Nido. That's the Mets. All right, we'll change that up when we get there. Mike Palm's here. Mike Palm saying hello, Terry, Joker, T McBee crew. Great show. Thank you, buddy. Aaron Davis. They've been better. They've been frisky over these last couple of games. There's a lot of just happenstance in there. That is just a bad overtime lineup. Pham is a good player. Getting Eloy Jimenez back definitely helped them. Gavin Sheets has been good this year. But other than those three guys and whatever Andrew Vaughn ends up doing, that is a really low-end lineup. So, yeah, a little bit of a uptick recently, but it'll be a blip in their season. They're going to play 350 ball the rest of the way. And maybe they'll make me eat those words. Baseball's weird. Who knows? But terrible lineup. Travis Wyndham's here. What's up, Trav? Larry C., I don't think I said hi to you directly, although I did read your Tyrone Taylor. Larry had a 2:30 conference call just finished just in time to get here. Love it. I like the idea of Larry just being on that call, like, all right, checking his watch. Like, hey, can we wrap this up? I got a podcast to listen to. Anyway, let's talk some baseball. Get onto the team board here. I'll update this to spin it through the projections, but this is roughly around where it should be. This was from few hours ago. Nick Tokes wants quick thoughts on the 407 slate. Is it 307 slate? 407 afternoon slate on DraftKings. Zach Wheeler should absolutely dominate that Angels team, even at 11K. That's an obvious SP1. I wouldn't hate Musgrove at 7,500 as an SP2 there. I think that'll probably be a pretty popular combo. And both Sandoval and Ashcraft should be fairly targetable with the two obviously better offenses. But at the same time, like Benson, even with as bad as he's been, plus Ellie. Oh man, I really don't like this version of the Reds lineup. Maybe like top three, Benson, Ellie, Steer. And then maybe you could grab like Nick Martini hitting fifth as another lefty bat. Jamer Candelario if you're desperate from the 7 spot. And maybe you target Musgrove. Depends on what ownership projections look like for that. If the Reds are under-owned, that's not awful. They're just a 3.5 total. So I imagine they're under-owned, under-projected against Musgrove. Musgrove's really good, though. I mean, I like Joe Musgrove overall. If you're going to the Padres, the obvious guys, Tatis, Cronenworth, and Machado out of the middle. No Bogarts in the lineup. Profar leading off is, fine. I don't really like him, but he's fine. Graham Pauley hitting fifth for 2,900 at third base is kind of interesting. And then I like Campusano for only 3,600 as a catcher. Jackson Merrill's also not bad for 3,800. If you're desperate, Tyler Wade is like a functional wraparound player. He's got a little bit of speed. He hasn't really done anything. I mean, he doesn't hit for average, doesn't get on base. But for 2,500, if you wanted to wrap him around, it sucks that he's a third baseman. You've also got 3 third basemen on that team, so it's difficult to stack. But that's kind of a weird way to go about that lineup. You'd be like basically skipping Manny Machado to take a really cheap Tyler Wade and connect him to like Profar, Tatis, and Cronenworth off the top, I guess. And then maybe you could put Jackson Merrill or Ha-Sung Kim. Those are two interesting hitters to have late in the lineup, 3,800 and 4,300. Some power, some speed between those two. If you're looking at the Angels, Joe Adell's been on fire in the 2 spot, but no Mike Trout. I mean, bump to Zach Wheeler. They're at a 3.3 run implied total as per Fantasy Labs. It's still the projected lineup. Luis Rengifo's kind of interesting. He's been hitting a little bit out of the 5 spot. Brandon Drury's been underperforming in the 4 spot. Taylor Ward's been really good in the 3. Nolan Chanuel sucks so far this season. Mickey Moniak is a frisky player who is a former 1-1 overall draft pick. Always a little bit of interest in some talent like that for only 2,900 in the outfield. Logan O'Hoppe at catcher, 4,200 is kind of interesting. And then just kind of the obvious guys through the top 5 for the Phillies. Kyle Schwarber, pretty solid home run opportunity, lefty against a lefty like Sandoval. Trey Turner's been terrific. Bryce Harper's fantastic. Alec Boehm's been probably the best player in baseball over the last 2 weeks or so. JT Realmuto's a terrific catcher. Castellanos has been bad, but he is good. Merrifield, Sosa, and Christian Pache mix and match type plays at the bottom of the lineup. So, favorite options are kind of the obvious Wheeler-Musgrove combo, but I do think you could go maybe like, Wheeler-Ashcraft, target some of the Padres and roster some of the Reds' bats against Musgrove. You could also roster, I don't know if you would want to do it without the idea of of a win bonus there. So yeah, it's probably just kind of the obvious, but you can get to some less than obvious bats within those obvious stacks. Anyway, that's the quick, I guess, semi-quick take on the 2-game 4 o'clock slate. You're welcome, Nick. That one was for Nick. 18 people here watching. Anyway, getting back to this one. Yankees at the Orioles. Corbin Burns on the mound, keeping the Yankees in check at a 3.87 run implied total. 8.5 runs total in that game, and the Orioles drawing a pretty healthy 4.73 against Luis Gil. Gil, a lot of strikeout ability, but a lot of walks. Very questionable spot for him. The Orioles are ridiculously good. Rockies at the Marlins, two really low-end teams with very bad pitching going in that one. 4.19 total for the Rockies, 4.91 on the other side for the Marlins. Marlins are going to be a super popular value play, I have to think, across both sides. I haven't really looked at the ownership, but it just seems like a straightforward, obvious kind of a play. I don't think the Rockies are uninteresting, and it seems like some other sites are recommending that Marlins pitcher, so maybe the Rockies could be an interesting contrarian play. There's a couple not terrible hitters that are off to good starts in that lineup, and if they're going up against pretty weak pitching, I have no issues getting to it with a reasonable enough run total. There's a lot of teams sub 4 today with a bunch of good pitchers going. We've only got one team above a 5-run total. That's the Rangers in that Washington at Texas game. That seems like an obvious spot that's going to be crazy popular, but for good cause. The Rangers at 5.22 in that one. Before we get to that one, though, the Cubbies at the Mets, 7.5 run total is the low point in the entire slate. Pretty decent pitching matchup. The Cubs at 3.96. The Mets at just 3.62 going up against Imanaga, who I'm really interested in. Top of the board today in projections. Him, Yamamoto, Corbin Burns are top 3, I believe. We'll pull it up in a sec. Giants at the Red Sox. Kind of interested in this one. I think the Red Sox are under projected by that run total. 4.22 implied runs. Going up against that pitcher, I'm kind of interested in the Sox here. 3.87 implied total for the Giants. Cutter Crawford looks pretty good for the Red Sox. Just a little bit pricey, but he's been terrific this year, and it looks like another good opportunity. And the Giants can feed some strikeouts to opposing pitchers on the right night, so I kind of like that. Nationals look pretty low end against Andrew Heaney. Looking at the numbers, they've been as compared to where they were last year against lefties, they've really not been good at all. 10% worse than average by WRC plus collectively against lefties for the active roster so far. CJ Abrams, surprisingly, has been fantastic so far against lefties. All of it is super small sample, doesn't really mean anything in the long term. But if we're just looking at it as like, well, the Nationals get a bump against lefties, and then Heaney's a lefty that we typically target for some home run upside, it might just be that Heaney home run upside where it's like, all right, the Nats did get, their 3.88, their 4 runs against him. Maybe they hit 2 home runs, but like you got to thread that needle between those 2 hitters and whoever scores for them. If you're looking for that correlation, becomes a little bit difficult if it's not a spot where it's like, all right, everybody's definitely going to get some hits today to pad those scoring numbers. Cleveland at Houston, both teams kind of interesting. Some good pitching going though. I could see the Guardians frustrating Justin Verlander in a shorter start than average, but I could also definitely see Justin Verlander dominating. He's been terrific over his first 2 outings, but not the greatest depth. They do a lot to limit strikeouts, put the ball in play, extend innings. So that's an interesting one. 8.5 run total, and then you've got the fantastic Astros lineup going up against a scuffling and short starting Tristan McKenzie on the other side. He's been a little bit better in his last 2 starts in terms of strikeouts, but the results kind of mixed. Only went 4 innings in his last one. We'll talk about it in a bit. 3.76 implied total for Cleveland against Verlander, 4.84 implied total for the Astros. Seems like another day where the Astros are going to be somewhat popular, somewhat of a, quote, obvious spot. I don't necessarily agree. I mean, I love the Astros. You guys know we go there a lot. We talk about them all the time, and they do project out well. But if I'm picking my favorite spots, going up against McKenzie, if he's getting into form for 5 innings, even if it's just for 5 innings, maybe not the best strategic decision. You've got the Rangers sitting there as the other obvious popular choice at 5.22, and just against a much worse pitcher. So it just seems like maybe we can avoid that popularity a little bit. But there's no reason that the Astros shouldn't succeed. And then you get into the bullpen and so on and so forth. And their lineup has been fantastic despite the win total, like what we talked about yesterday. Last game of the night, it is Jordan Montgomery starting in this game, despite what FanDuel's been saying all day. I don't know if they've changed it yet. but they've had Zach Gallen as the starter. Montgomery, if you missed it, there was a beehive in the in the net behind home plate, and it delayed the game by I don't know how long, but quite a while. And Montgomery didn't end up making the start last night, so he's starting today. Pretty great video going around of the guy going up in one of those big utility baskets way up to the top of the net, which is pretty high off the ground, and taking the beehive out. They brought in an actual beekeeper to get it, I guess. And he's up there, and they're playing "I Need a Hero" in the background in the stadium with 40,000 people, rocking and everything. It's pretty funny. But ridiculous situation there. But so now we get Yamamoto against Jordan Montgomery. So similar situation for Montgomery. He's got the Dodgers down to a 4.89 implied total, still one of the highest on the board. Still the Dodgers, still elite at the top. But Montgomery's very good. It's just one of those spots where it's his effectiveness might run into their ability, and they just end up with 3-4 runs scored. He doesn't have a great day. They don't have a great day, but neither of them are terrible either. So it's an interesting spot there. And then Yamamoto, it's kind of similar. I like his upside better because Montgomery is limited by strikeouts. He typically pitches deep into games, but if he can't make it up via strikeouts with some runs scored against a really low strikeout Dodgers team, it's more difficult for him to hit ceiling than I think it is for Yamamoto to hit ceiling, because he's a tremendous strikeout pitcher. Even going up against a tough Diamondbacks lineup, he's got them down at 4.21 implied runs. Dodgers drawing 4.89 on their side. So it's a really interesting board given how many teams are below 4, right? Basically, most of the visitors below 4 implied runs. A couple of the home teams had healthy totals. The Orioles look really decent. The Marlins at that weird high total, but again, they're going to be super popular. So really interesting slate. On the pitching board, like I said, Imanaga at the top, but it's not a lot of daylight between him and Corbin Burns, between them and Yamamoto, even between all three of them and Luis Gil. This is the lowest faith one on the board for sure. 7,800 on both sites, though. Gil's got pretty significant strikeout upside. It's just he's going up against that ridiculous Baltimore offense, and he's shaky. He comes with a lot of questions. He doesn't really provide a lot of depth. You really, even on FanDuel at 7,800, the way that this slate shakes out, I think you can get away with a Gil start if he finds his strikeouts and isn't bad, even if he only goes 5 and change, doesn't book the quality start, but still has a good day. I think you're all right. It's just the risk of how many people he walks, how many free passes he's going to probably give this Orioles team, and just how good they are top to bottom. So I don't love that, but I wasn't going to really get in there and manipulate the projection. I wanted to leave it alone. I think the projection's okay, but it's the lowest faith spot on the board. All three of these guys I definitely believe in. Imanaga has been one of the best pitchers in baseball to start the season. 10-3, 9,800. He's expensive, but totally worth it. I think that's the easier matchup out of these three. The Mets have underperformed to start the season. They're less threatening, certainly, than the Yankees, certainly than the Diamondbacks, also than the Orioles, and probably than the Guardians. So it's the best matchup among those pitchers, and he projects out at the top. He's got good strikeout stuff. He's been excellent at limiting runs, checking power. So I really like that spot. I definitely think Corbin Burns has major upside against the Yankees. There are strikeouts to be had in that lineup despite the Yankees' quality. It's also one of those spots, though, even at a 3.8 implied total, Yankees could turn around and hang some runs on anybody. You're still dealing with a lineup that has some elite players in it. So it's not the best matchup for Burns, but he's probably got the highest overall ceiling on the slate as well. 10-6, 9,400, well worth it. Not my first go-to option if I'm building one lineup, but across 150, I want to have a nice chunk of Corbin Burns shares. Across 20 lineups, 8, something like that. That leaves me not enough. 6? If I'm building 20 lineups on the one pitcher site, let's say. 6 Burns, 6 Imanaga, 4 Yamamoto, 2 Gil, 1 Verlander, 1 Buto, something like that. I think that works out. That leaves Crawford out, though. Crawford projects really well. Is his DraftKings projection low? that seems low. I wonder what's going on there. I'm gonna flag that so I look at it. That Crawford, it just against the FanDuel projection is usually like half or thereabouts. That seems a little bit low. I'm not sure why he's under projecting on DraftKings. Might be something funky in the model. Cutter Crawford is at this level. So if I resort by FanDuel, I think that's realistically where Crawford belongs. And that's appropriate for where he's salaried. So that DraftKings projection is low. Glad I caught that. I wonder if that's something I can fix. I'm going to have to figure out where that is after the show. I'll get it updated after the show, though. All right, so continue on. And if you look at the rankings, he's right, because the rankings I usually do by FanDuel scoring, or I always do by FanDuel scoring. Continuing on, so Verlander, just a tough spot against that Guardians team. A little bit low strikeout. Not sure what the depth totally looks like. He's been excellent so far. So I expect him to succeed, but there's a little bit of a chance that they frustrate him, a little bit of a chance that he falls short of the 6 innings. So middle of the board kind of a projection. 10,000 makes him a little bit tougher to play on FanDuel. 9,200, that price is pretty good for his upside. Pretty tremendous ceiling for Justin Verlander any given slate. Jose Butto's been mostly good. 8,200, 8,100 though. It just puts him in a weird price fit, right? Having him there with, Cutter Crawford at 86 is much better than him. It's just a weird option. He's not quite cheap enough, and he's not quite good enough to justify, I don't think, as an SP1 where he projects. Heaney against Washington, I don't like it at all. I don't really like Andrew Heaney's upside. Washington, for all their flaws, pretty decent at limiting strikeouts still. Roderick Munoz is the interesting one. He's the guy going for Miami. We'll talk about him in a second. I don't really think there's much opportunity here. He projects out okay, and certainly for the money, he projects out just fine. But if people are going to it, I really don't have that much faith in it. He has not been that good in the minors. Had some strikeout upside that I left on the table, and obviously, Rockies on the road against a righty, always a good spot for pitching. But I have major questions. 6,500 seems like he should be more like 5,000, like Dalton Jeffries, Dakota Hudson kind of pricing. 65 is a big asking price. Like, I think I'd almost honestly rather have Heaney at 6,000 for 500 less. Like, I'd rather target the Nationals with Heaney than go to Roderick Munoz, even against the Rockies. So I question the price. I question what the popularity is going to be. If other sites are recommending it, it might be coming through Sims. I'm not sure. So that's an interesting one. Montgomery against the Dodgers, I just think is like a mid, collision of talent, but low strikeouts against a better lineup that's probably going to result in like a mid-level start from him. Do like Crawford again. He belongs more up here. We resorted. McKenzie is a pretty hefty no for me against Houston, and all these guys are kind of obvious no's. Let's get into some game by game. Aloysius, what's going on, buddy? So, Luis Hill, 7,800. Again, very good price for the upside on both sides. It's just he comes with a pretty tremendous downside as well, in my opinion. He hasn't completed 6 innings yet. The closest he got was 5 2/3, 2 starts back. That was against the Rays. Had a very good day. Struck out 9, walked 3 of 20. Struck out 9 of 23, walked 3 hitters, gave up 1 unearned run on 2 hits. That was a really good start. Start before that, struck out 6 but walked 7 against the Jays. Gave up 3 earned on just 3 hits. 8 strikeouts in a start before that, 4 1/3 against that same Blue Jays team, 4 2/3, 6 strikeouts against the Diamondbacks. And then the most recent start, struck out 6, walked 2, gave up 2 home runs and 5 earned runs on 6 hits, and went just 5 innings against the Brewers. The first home run was early, and then the second one was the backbreaker later in the game when he came out. But there is upside. The question comes from the walks. You probably saw the pattern as I was going through that. A lot of walks in each of those games. Amounts to a 32.4% strikeout rate, but a 17.6% walk rate. There's some problems there, but you can see the Stuff Plus. Mark loves him. The combined Stuff Plus at 121.29. That's, again, 100 is league average. So Stuff Plus loves the arsenal. He's been excellent at limiting premium contact and hard hits despite the home runs that he gave up the last game. That was 2 home runs. Those are the first 2 home runs he gave up all season. 26.4% hard hits, 88.2 miles an hour of exit velo, 5.7% barrels in the small sample, 24 2/3 and 5 starts. We're not talking about much, but we did see him succeed back before the injuries and all a couple years ago. He's coming in with a 12.1% swinging strike rate, a decent but not great 28.5% CSW. I do think there's talent here. I do think there's upside here. The price is right as a value play. It's just know that you're rolling the dice on a guy who is walking 17.6% of opposing hitters against a team that doesn't have tremendous walk rates, but does have some hitters that definitely know how to draw their walks and will when they need to. And they have tremendous on-base skills. That top 6 hitters that I just highlighted there have a collective 362 on base right now. They've also got all these home runs. They've got a handful of stolen bases. They're also creating runs at a ridiculous clip. The average WRC plus for those same 6 guys is 59% better than average. So it just seems like one of those spots where it's, I don't want to tangle with the Orioles, but at the same time, he's one of the highest ceiling players, one of the highest ceiling pitchers in that price range, probably the highest ceiling. 78, I think higher ceiling than Buto, probably a higher ceiling than Montgomery in this spot. You can maybe argue McKenzie if he had a ridiculous day against the Astros and ended up going 6. Otherwise, he'll kind of on his own on a price island there in like the lower mid range at 78. If you put Crawford in that same range at 86, and you're just talking about middle of the price board starters, then it's Crawford. I have more faith in Cutter Crawford against the Giants than I do in Luis Hill against the Orioles. And again, this projection is incorrect. He should be projected right about the same. So, you know what? What I can do, I can just manually edit that right now. I'm just going to give him a 14 and change right now so that it's at least corrected on the site. Bear with me one sec, guys. Just want to get that right for everybody out there. At least he's up high on the board so people don't notice. I'm just going to change the 10 to a 14. There we go. 14.82 instead of 10.82. Perfect. That's like exactly where it belongs. I bet I don't know why those 4 points are missing, but I bet that's exactly where it would go if I correct whatever that is. Anyway, it's corrected on the site. Burns on the other side of this game. Well, let's do the Orioles lineup first. Gunnar Henderson, pretty fantastic. 10 home runs on the season. 356 on base, creating runs 75% better than average. 6 stolen bases. Gunnar Henderson is a full-fledged superstar at this point. 4,500, 6,100. The sites definitely noticed. What they haven't noticed is how good Ryan O'Hearn has been. He still only costs 2,900, 4,400 across sites. He's hitting third. He's crushing the ball when he makes contact. 15% barrels, 45% hard hits in a small sample of batted ball events. Over 75 plate appearances. He's got 4 home runs, a 254 ISO, creating runs 66% better than average. 299, 373, 552. Continuing the solid breakout season that he had last year. 368 plate appearances. He was 18% better than average for runs. Hit 14 homers, had a good ISO. Tremendous triple slash. Ryan O'Hearn got good somewhere along the way before 2023. Had a good year in a medium amount of plate appearances last year. He's off to a terrific start, and the sites have not noticed. They have not moved his price at all. So take advantage while he's still cheap. Ryan Mountcastle, 4,800, 3,300 is also very cheap. 4 home runs, a 192 ISO, creating runs 40% better than average, getting on at a 351 clip. Also hitting the ball with a pretty tremendous contact profile, which he's always had. Power's been up and down in terms of the game power of the home runs, but with the average and everything right where it is, he had a big dip last year that was underexplained, under-discussed. I didn't actually know about it until earlier this season, but he went through vertigo last year, and I guess it really messed with some of his numbers, but everything kind of back where it's supposed to be. He's been tremendous over 111 plate appearances. I skipped over Adley, but obviously a go-to catcher option any given slate. Slashing 322, 362, 449 with a 136 WRC plus, 4 home runs. Plays every day, 16.5% strikeout rate. He's constantly putting bat on ball. That's the other thing about O'Hearn so far this year. 9.3% strikeout rate, drawing a 10.7% walk. He's either putting the ball in play with a pretty excellent contact profile, or he's drawing walks. Super, super productive so far this year. That's how you get 66% better than average grading runs. Again, very small sample. Meaningless 75 plate appearances, but it is just continuing this 368. So he's been terrific. Colton Cowser's been excellent. I love the spot hitting, 5th in the lineup, 5,200, 3,100 across sites. This is too low. That'll go up as the stats update. Over 86 plate appearances, 6 home runs, 303, 372, 632 slug, 329 ISO, making immense contact, 16.3% barrels, and 55.1% hard hits. He's been fantastic this season. Jordan Westberg, second, third base eligible, triple position eligible on the FanDuel slate. He's creating runs 54% better than average. Both of those guys, 303 averages. On base is 372 for Cowser, 355 for Westberg, 222 ISO for Westberg. They've both been ridiculous. They're both probably a little bit inexpensive, particularly on DraftKings. Westberg's priced up on FanDuel, but at least you get 3 positions out of it. He's actually, everybody else, too cheap. Westberg being at 36 and Gunnar at 45, but everybody in between them in the low 3s to Ryan O'Hearn at 2,900 makes this team easy to afford, and they've got a lot of positional flex on FanDuel. A little bit on DraftKings too. Cedric Mullins, decent start for counting stats, 6 home runs, 6 stolen bases, just a 99 WRC plus, but a 208 ISO, 40.8% hard hit rate. I'll take the counting stats. He's very cheap at 4,500, 3,200 for a guy who could easily go 30-30 this year. Histon Kjerstad back in the lineup, 2,500, 2,300. The rookie has made 5 plate appearances. He's gone completely over so far. They're just going to keep rotating these high-end rookies until somebody sticks. But he's another tremendous minor league hitter, a guy who's really expected to hit. Ramon Urias at the bottom of the lineup, kind of dragging things down with a 28 WRC plus over 47 plate appearances. But from here to here, that team is very, very stackable against Luis Gil. But I do think you can play him against them, especially considering the price and what the ceiling for him looks like if he has a good strikeout day and manages to limit the walks. And again, in a small sample, some of this comes from 1-7 walk game. So bear that in mind. On the other side, Corbin Burnes, tremendous. 9,400, 10.6, justifiably the highest pricing on the slate. 25.6% strikeout rate, down a little bit from where he's been. 25.5 last year, but 30.5% the year before, and like 33 something back in 2021. But still a fantastic pitcher. 2.55 ERA with a 3.36 xFIP so far this year, a sub-1 whip, generating an 11.3% swinging strike rate, nearly a 30% CSW. It's allowed a little bit of premium contact and power, 10.6% barrels, 41.5% hard hits, 3.65% home run rate. Stuff Plus obviously loves Corbin Burnes. Last year, there was only a minor amount of power, so this is a blip in the long term. This will go away as the season continues. But if he makes one of these mistakes against some of these hitters, it could be problematic for him. Do we have this Yankees lineup yet? Before I talk about it. That's just from the department of the Yankees can get to anybody alerts. The Yankees can get to anybody. So there is just a minor asterisk of, paying a lot against some elite competition. I think that works more the other direction in that Corbin Burnes is a very good investment. And again, I would have a tremendous share of them across a bunch of lineups. If I'm looking at the Yankees, though, remember what we talked about yesterday or the day before with when I'm looking for a contrarian team, I'd like it to still be a good lineup, especially if they're facing an elite pitcher like this. I would expect the Yankees are going to be pretty low owned here. You can see even in the home run model, like the home run model doesn't love him. Soto at 7.77, Judge just at 9. Corbin Burnes is typically very, very good at limiting power and what the Yankees do well. So it's a really challenging spot. But if there's ever a day to roster the Yankees as a completely contrarian option where you're getting only Soto and Judge at correct pricing and everybody else pretty cheap, it makes that an interesting angle into the slate. It is almost certainly not going to work out in your favor. But on the day that the Yankees hang 8 runs on Burnes, chase him early, get into the bullpen, and keep on going, that's a winner. That's a slate winner. So that's the angle on the Yankees. I'm not saying to take it. I'm not saying it's good. Corbin Burnes is fantastic. He is easily the choice in the head-to-head. But that's the angle on the eggs. Anthony Volpe at 4,700, 3,200. Off to a decent start. Gotten into some bad habits again, but maintaining an okay triple slash, 271, 358, 398 in a small sample, 3 home runs, 7 stolen bases, creating runs 24% better than average. Juan Soto is Juan Soto. Aaron Judge is Aaron Judge. They're both fantastic. Judge is catching on a little bit for the season, up to a 118 WRC plus, a 207 ISO, 6 home runs. That'll all go up. The triple slash will go up. Perfectly fine to pay for Judge at 4,100, 6,000. And Soto's just been fantastic all year, as advertised. Giancarlo Stanton, 4,600, 3,100 across sites. Decent start for power, 232 ISO, 6 home runs. That's all we're really looking for from Stanton. Crushes the ball when he makes contact with it and always has. 4,600, 3,100. Price is right even against Burnes, especially if Burnes makes one of these mistakes against Stanton. That ball's going. Rizzo, kind of rounded back into form, 258, 321, 417, up to a 115 WRC plus, 5 home runs on the board. Looking a lot more like Anthony Rizzo. Looked like it was just a minor dip in April, so we're all right. The price is way down for Rizzo at 4,000. 3,200 is closer on FanDuel, but still a few $100 cheap. Gleyber Torres off to a terrible start so far, 66 WRC plus, really dragging this lineup down. He's supposed to be much, much better than this. I do expect Gleyber to round into form, especially after a really good year last year, but it's been problematic. It does have his price way down, 2,600 on FanDuel, 3,900 on DraftKings, too cheap. Ozzy Cabrera is already starting to come back to earth after a very hot start to the season. He's down to a 93 WRC plus. Triple slash is already coming back down. Been saying all along he's not that hitter, and he's definitely not. Trevino, Trent Grisham, about at the bottom of the lineup. Actually, we do have this. Grisham, Trevino, Cabrera is the order that it goes in at the bottom. A little bit different order. Doesn't really matter for those 3 hitters. Don't really want any of them. Trevino is off to an okay start. 280, 339, 400, a 115 WRC plus with 2 homers. And Grisham hit a home run the other day, but everything else has been pretty terrible, and he's not much of a hitter. I guess if you're playing on DraftKings and you plan on building a full 5-man stack of contrarian Yankees for probably bad reasons, Trevino at 2,800 is moderately in play if you wanted to get real cheap at catcher. But the upside is low. He's not this hitter. So Corbin Burnes, pretty big yes. Orioles bats, pretty big yes against Hill. Hill himself, pretty big yes at a very good mid-range value price against the Orioles with strikeout upside. And then the Yankees only as like a wild contrarian dart throw. But there is obvious ceiling there. Very low floor, or very big basement. Also a very high ceiling on the right day. Rockies and the Marlins. So let's talk Roderick Munoz. At AAA this season, 3 starts, 4 appearances, 15 2/3, an 8.62 ERA and an 8.41 xFIP with an 11 point something. What is that? Why is that not scrolling over? With an 11.7% strikeout rate and an 18.2% walk rate. In a larger sample in AAA last year, he had a 22% strikeout rate and a 15% walk rate. He has bounced around. He's 24, so he's pitching at not a crazy advanced age for AAA, but he's not a young prospect. In 2023, he was originally drafted by the Braves. He was DFA'd by the Braves last year. Then he joined the Nationals. At some point he landed with, he was waived by Washington in the offseason. He was claimed by the Pirates to start this year. Then he was DFA'd by the Pirates and signed by the Marlins for cash. Acquired by the Marlins for cash considerations after being DFA'd. So he's kind of bounced around at several organizations, including 2 of the worst in baseball, the Nationals and the Pirates, that had really no use for this guy. The Braves, with their total lack of pitching, probably, if he was any good, would have wanted to hang on to him somewhere along the way. So at certain points, options and things like that become issues. But there's probably a reason that he's never really come up to the show, that he's never really succeeded in the minors. He did strike out 81 hitters over 78 innings in the minors last year across 3 levels with Washington and Atlanta. This is per Inside the Marlins at SI.com, this paragraph. So that's what the strikeout rate at 22% comes from. But he walked 53 of those 53 hitters in the same 78 innings. So again, an aggressively high 15% walk rate in AAA last season. I do not think this is a good pitcher. 95-mile-an-hour fastball with an upside to like 98, according to this article. 90-mile-an-hour slider. I could pull him up on StatCast. We do have one start from the 20th. He started against the Cubs in a spot start, and he was surprisingly effective. He struck out 7, walked just 1. So that makes it weird. He gave up 2 home runs in that game, but just those 2 hits facing 18 Cubs. Take what you will from that. Stuff Plus didn't like what he did in that game. That amounted to a 20% barrel rate and an 11.11% home run rate, hilariously, but obviously a monster strikeout rate given those numbers in a 5-inning start. At 65, I just think he's a little expensive, and again, Colorado against a Rocky on the road is like a very targetable spot. That's why he projects well, but I think people will go here, and I don't know what the upside really looks like. I don't know what the ceiling really looks like. Ezekiel Tovar on the other side, off to a pretty good start, 281, 331, 421, 98 WRC plus is not that great, 2% below average, but 3 home runs, 2 stolen bases, and a stable triple slash, making okay contact with a 40.3% hard hit rate. It cost $3,100, $4,300. This team's cheap. Brenton Doyle, off to a terrific start, 3 home runs, 4 stolen bases, a 122 WRC plus, 41.4% hard hits, slashing 311, 355, 485 to start the season. Do I think Brenton Doyle's an all-star? No. Do I think Brenton Doyle's off to a good start after having a somewhat frisky year at the bottom of the lineup with 10 home runs and 22 stolen bases, but a terrible triple slash last year? Yeah, I think at 3,200, 4,200 against this pitcher, he could be interesting. Ryan McMahon at 4,800, 3,100, despite a very strong start to the season. 321, 397, 495, creating runs 36% better than average on this terrible team. 4 home runs, lefty bat against this pitcher. 11% barrels, 54.6% hard hits. Barrel rate's about the same, a little bit up from 2 years ago, about the same as last year. Hard hits are up in the small sample. Ryan McMahon is a good player, having off to a good first 127 plate appearances. Take advantage. Elias Diaz, 4,200, 2,700. Good hitting catcher, 293, 350, 402 start to the season. 3% worse than average creating runs. Again, this is a bad baseball team, but this is a good triple slash. 2 home runs. Bad premium contact, but doesn't really strike out, doesn't really walk, so he's putting the ball in play. He only costs $4,200. He's hitting cleanup against this pitcher. Charlie Blackmon, not off to a great start. Contact-oriented hitter, but at least he's left-handed, 4,500, 2,800. A lot of veteran track record for base hits. A little bit of power left in the bat, again, against this pitcher. Brendan Rodgers I don't really like, but he's cheap, 3,300, 2,500. There's just, I don't know how much talent is actually there. Eleodis Montero, I do kind of believe in the bat. The home run model likes it at 7.22. Not a great mark, but against this pitcher, there's upside. Bad minor league pitcher against a questionable major league hitter, but a guy who has succeeded for power in the minor leagues. I'm going to lean toward the guy who succeeded for power against the minor league pitcher. 3,300, 2,700. He's cheap enough, makes it work. He's got 2 home runs in 95 plate appearances. That's not great. .093 ISO, not great. Contact profile's been pretty bad so far this year. It was better in a small sample last year. Jordan Beck, I don't think is on either slate. He's a fairly big rookie call-up for them. Went 2 for 4 in his first game, it looks like. Created some runs. Good for him. 3,100, 2,400 for Sean Borchardt. He's not uninteresting at the bottom of the lineup. In 43 plate appearances last year, he hit 4 home runs in the show. 316, 372, 684. That's a pretty decent cup of coffee. Year before that, 97 plate appearances. 297, 454, 500. Created runs 58% better than average. Hit 3 home runs in that sample. That's a pretty good 140 plate appearances. So I don't think the Rockies are completely uninteresting here. And if this pitcher is going to get popular, I think he's worth targeting. Let me see what his ownership looks like. Mamba's here. What's going on, Mamba? Another top 30 finish. Frustrating. My lineups are this good and can't get the leverage to get the top. You'll get there, buddy. It's more about consistently putting lineups at that level and just grinding it out. Eventually just happenstance takes over and you get there. It's more about consistently putting in that range rather than getting there once, But that's great. That's a great result. You should be happy about that. Aaron Davis is going to do Juan Munoz moonshot lineup. So let's see what the ownership looks like. Again, the ownership always anytime I bring it up, we're getting it from over at RotoGrinders. Not giving away their numbers. He's in the upper single digits, let's say, on FanDuel, but that's not where it's really important. It's more important on DraftKings. I really don't think he's a good FanDuel option, even at the very, very cheap price. He's super popular on DraftKings, as expected. This is per their projections. I'm not sure where he's projected for ownership on other sites. That, to me, seems worth targeting. I do not think this is a good pitcher. I don't think the Rockies are a good baseball team at all. But I do not think this is a good pitcher. I think that ownership is worth targeting, and at $6,500, I don't think he's cheap enough to really make him a good value. Anybody can beat this Rockies team. Anybody can have a good 5-6 innings against this Rockies team. It is certainly on the board. He had a good 5-inning start against the Cubs. That's a much better team. But I think he's worth targeting with some Rockies bats, especially if you're building a bunch of lineups. On the other side, the Marlins, I think they're going to be more popular. They're going up against Dakota Hudson, who's been terrible, 13.8% strikeouts and a 12.9% walk rate with a 6.57 ERA, a 5.08 xFIP, and an 84.73 stuff plus mark. He's given up some power. He's given up a home run in each of his last 3 starts, 6 earned runs, 4 earned runs, 5 earned runs. The start before that was 3 earned runs. Had a decent 5 1/3 against the Cubbies in his first outing of the year, but only struck out 2 and walked 2. Just happened to give up no earned runs. Did give up 3 actual runs on 4 hits. So even that wasn't a good start. He hasn't been good in a single outing all season. There's a reason he pitches for the Rockies. Do not play Dakota Hudson at 5,300, 6,900. You absolutely can fire away with Marlins bats. I just think they're going to be very, very popular. And I will see if I can back that up by, yep, they're going to be popular. Even if these projections are a little bit high, they're still going to be really popular. Justifiably so. Even with them not being a very good team, Dakota Hudson's really bad. You've got Luis Arraez at the top of the lineup for just 4,400, 2,800. Star caliber bat in terms of the hit tool, the on-base skills, and probably the best correlated scoring option in baseball. Just needs help from his friends to actually deliver the full value of that. But he's a guy who's getting on base at a 350 clip. He's up to a 299 average, creating runs 7% better than average. And this is after a very cold start. This is really rounded into form on the front end of the triple slash. So everything's going to go up. Would actually be funny if he hits 400 this year after a terrible start, the opposite of last year. Just needs to hit probably like 410 the rest of the way, or 415 the rest of the way or something. Brian De La Cruz, 3,800, 3,100. Still very, very cheap for a player with 5 home runs already this season. A 105 WRC plus, making pretty good contact at 11.8% barrels, 43% hard hits. Strikes out a fair amount. Doesn't really walk that much. Maybe playing a little bit above his head, but that DraftKings price is very, very low on, again, what's going to be a very popular team. But that's what makes this team so appealing in this spot against a terrible pitcher, is how cheap they are. So it's kind of the inverse of the Yankees, where you're getting a very good team against a very, very good pitcher that's likely to beat them. Here, you're just getting a very bad team against a terrible pitcher that they're likely to crush, but at tremendous ownership, but at least you're not paying a premium to do it. Jazz Chisholm's their best player, 5,300, 3,300. That's at 239, 331, 394. Kind of a mixed quality in the triple slash so far. All of that needs to improve a little bit, but he does have 4 home runs, 5 stolen bases, 4.94 in the home run model. Hudson hasn't given up a tremendous amount of power over time, right? Like, he's always kept home runs a little bit limited. He's been decent at limiting launch angles. None of this makes him a good pitcher, but it's why their home run numbers are a little bit low. But he's obviously gettable for home runs. And Chisholm's one of the better candidates in this lineup to do it. Josh Bell, mired at 181, 269, 284, just a 62 WRC plus. Everything gets worse after these 3 hitters, right? You can see that in the WRC plus, just a 37 for the confirmed final 6 hitters in this lineup. That's really, really bad. So it gets really weak which is probably another good reason to just consider maybe skipping the super chalky Marlins. You can definitely mix them in, but I kind of like the undercut on this side and playing this side a little bit. It just makes more sense to me because, like, again, play these three guys, but they're going to be really popular. Josh Bell is a better hitter than this, no doubt. He's got more power than the 3 home runs. He's certainly a better hitter than 181, 269. I don't know for sure that Jesus Sanchez is much better in terms of hitting, but I know he's got more power than he's shown at a .086 ISO and just 2 home runs. Making very good contact, not getting the output. He's got 4 stolen bases, but WRC plus been terrible. Tim Anderson's been lost, and I think he actually got scratched from the lineup. Somebody mentioned that. Nick Gordon, 3 home runs, but a terrible triple slash, 50% worse than average creating runs over his 72 plate appearances, and no real great track record for him. Emmanuel Rivera, Christian Bethancourt. There's really not much to like down lineup, especially like that whole part. I'm fine with Bell and Sanchez, but then you're just rostering the top 5, the most popular guys. It's very straightforward. It's very straight line. The values there, they're going up against a terrible, terrible pitcher. They're justifiably popular. But I don't know how much sense it makes, especially if these guys are going to struggle to turn the lineup over. Good reason to think these guys can succeed against this pitcher and can help drive a rally, but it's not a good group to rely on for a ton of shares. So if they're with their popularity, I kind of like the idea of the undercut and getting different for value. Neither pitcher for me, but I get it if you want to take shots on Rodri Munoz. Just doesn't really make sense to me. I'd rather target him with some Rockies bats in large GPPs especially. And then Dakota Hudson is a huge no. And the top of the Marlins lineup makes sense, but they're going to be super popular. Cubbies and the Mets, we probably have these lineups by now. And we got the Mets anyway. As Larry mentioned earlier, Tyrone Taylor leading off. That's kind of interesting. So no Nimmo against the talented lefty, but Tyrone Taylor really interesting in that spot. Pretty good power bat success against lefties in his track record. 3,100, 2,700 across sites. He's very cheap. Out to an okay start. Creating runs 6% better than average. He's got 2 homers, 2 steals, slashing 277, 304, 415. Okay bat on ball numbers. Okay barrel rates. You'd like the hard hits to be a little bit higher. This was a good barrel rate a couple years ago. Low strikeout number so far this year with a low walk rate, so he's putting the ball in play a decent amount. 22.6% strikeouts, 3.3% walks last year. Hit 10 home runs in just 243 plate appearances. Year before, 17 home runs in 405 plate appearances with a 209 ISO. Last year, 212 ISO. So there's realistic power upside for Tyrone Taylor. It's just Imanaga's been really, really good. Stuff Plus doesn't love the arsenal so far, but he's one of those pitchers that just makes things work. So I have a lot of faith in what the numbers have looked like for Imanaga so far. I don't think he's going to continue to go, 2 starts allowing runs and then 3 starts with no runs as a pattern all season. But I do think he's very, very good, and I think this is a very gettable Mets lineup. Starling Marte, 4,200, 3,300, 288, 327, 442 triple slash, 4 home runs, 6 stolen bases. Nice to see him come back to life. Pretty good start to his season. Also a 9.9% barrel rate, 46.9% hard hits. Marte at 3,300, 4,200 is definitely a good buy if you're rostering Mets. Lindor's been terrible, but 5 home runs, 4 stolen bases. We know what the ceiling is like for Francisco Lindor. I think you just continue buying if you're stacking Mets. You don't skip them that often, especially with his price down at 4,900. 3,500, he could be a little bit cheaper given the struggles on FanDuel. But again, the upside's tremendous. He was a 30-30 just last year, 31-31. 216 ISO, created runs 21% better than average. Eventually, he's going to round into form. Pete Alonso, 11.2% barrel rate so far. Oddly, just a 30.3% hard hit rate. That should adjust back to career norms. 8 home runs, 243 ISO, 128 WRC plus. Nothing's wrong with Pete Alonso outside of this weird little contact anomaly. Looks pretty good with just an 18.1% strikeout rate. Pretty low strikeout numbers at the top of the Mets lineup. A couple more gettable hitters late, but Alonso's terrific. Pretty cheap for his upside on DraftKings at just 5,200. He's 12.02 in a pretty short home run model today. Not a lot of hitters above the magic number today. So Alonso's interesting for home runs. He's interesting for a one-off against Imanaga. Could certainly get him, But again, talented pitcher, not giving up a ton of power yet. JD Martinez, similar things for a cheaper price, 4,300, 2,800, hit 33 home runs last year. Jeff McNeil, slap hitter, relies on BABIP. Bader, totally skippable. Brett Beatty, skippable. And Tomas Nido, pretty skippable, mostly here for defense at the bottom of the lineup. So it's a pretty short Mets lineup, which also I think feeds the upside for Imanaga, who's sitting at a 25.9% strikeout rate over 27 2/3 in 5 starts, just a 2.8% walk rate. He's walked 3 hitters all season in 5 starts, 27 2/3 innings. Last time out, faced Boston at Fenway, 6 1/3, faced 26 hitters, gave up 1 run on a solo shot, 5 total hits, struck out 7, walked 1. Gave up a home run to the Marlins in the start before that. 2 earned runs, 3 total runs on 5 hits, struck out 5, walked 0, went 6 innings in that game. Those were the first 2 home runs he gave up in 5 starts. Before those 2 games, he had also not given up an earned run in any of his starts. 3 starts before that. He faced Colorado, the Dodgers, and Seattle, so one really good team against which he only went 4 innings, struck out 3, walked 0, only allowed 2 hits and no runs, but kind of a mixed bag considering the short start. 6 innings against the Rockies, he struck out 9 in a 2-hit shutout performance, struck out 4, walked 2, gave up 1 unearned run on 5 hits in 5 1/3 at Seattle. So he's been fantastic. The price is right, I think, at $9,800 on DraftKings. Happy to pay $10,300 for him on FanDuel where I can afford it. I think he makes for a good combo with any of those discount teams. Definitely looks sharp against the Mets lineup that is, at best, middle of the road with some question marks with a really struggling Lindor and then real question marks at the bottom of that lineup. Going the other way, Jose Butto, 8,100, 8,200. Pitching really well in terms of strikeouts, 27.8% strikeout rate, a 12.4% swinging strike rate. Just a 26.8% CSW makes me question some of the success. The 2.86 ERA is nice, but a 4.17 xFIP is definitely more realistic. And some issues with hard hits. Exit velos right at 90 miles an hour, hard hits at 50% over just 22 innings and 4 starts. Just a 2.22% home run rate, but that seems maybe a little bit lucky. Stuff plus just at 86.88. Again, 100 is league average. Anything below is below league average, so that's not great. Looking at Butto's recent performances, 4 strikeouts, 3 walks, gave up 2 home runs and 4 earned runs in 5 2/3 against St. Louis. Prior to that, pretty decent performances. A 6 strikeout, 5 walk performance against the Dodgers over just 4 1/3. That one's a little bit shaky as well. But 2 good 6-inning starts to start the year. Against Detroit and against Kansas City, struck out 6 Tigers and 9 Royals in those 2 games. Gave up just 1 earned run in the 12 innings. So he's got talent, he's got ability, but again, I think it's just an awkward price fit at 81, 82, given where, there are some playable values on the board and there are some very good top-end pitchers, and the guys with just better ceilings for cheaper prices or similar ceilings for similar prices. So I don't love the Butto fit, and I do like this Cubs lineup in terms of their ability to get on base and create some runs. They've been up and down for the season. We'll see what the lineup actually looks like. See if we've got it. 428, we're fine on time. That just came out. Horner, Tauchman, Happ, Morel, Bush, Swanson, Mervis, Amaya, and Crow Armstrong. Is that exactly what we have? Yep, looks right. So it's this lineup. So if you're stacking Cubs, which you can certainly target Butto in some shares, he's walked 13.3%, again, giving up a ton of hard hits. And this is what I'd be targeting if I'm considering Cubs, given their ability to draw walks and get on base. They have a few pretty good, aggressively good walk rates over time. So I think there's good reason to target the Cubs on their on-base upside and then expect some hard hits, even if they're not hitting home runs. This is a team that gets a lot of barrels, gets some decent hard hit rates across this lineup. So I think it's an interesting spot for the Cubs, and they're not really priced up as compared to some of the best teams on the board. In fact, they're downright cheap. So interesting spot for them. Nobody's been outrageously good, maybe except with the exception of Michael Bush. Over 108 plate appearances, he's got a 234 ISO, 132 WRC+, 6 home runs on the board. Got 4 home runs from Morel so far, but seemed to be heating up a little bit. A couple of good games in a row. Mike Tauchman's been exceptionally good for his talent level, for our expectations of Mike Tauchman. He still only cost $2,700, $3,500 across sites. He's been hitting the ball pretty effectively with a 12.3% barrel, 42.1% hard hits. He gets on base at a 435 clips so far over 92 plate appearances. What I like about that is that was consistent with previous performance. 363 on base last year and 401 plate appearances. Only had 8 home runs. He's part of the way there. 7 stolen bases. Creative runs 7% better than average, though. Hitting for more ISO, more power this year. Getting a regular chance in the lineup. I kind of like Tauchman at very, very cheap prices. Is at least a good way to bring down the pricing on everybody else who's already cheap. Ian Happ scuffling along at 216, 333, 314. He's getting on base at an okay clip, but that's low for him. All of that's going to go up. I have a lot of faith in Happ to turn things around. I like the upside at just 3,000, 4,400. Chris Morel, again, seems to be rounding into form, 9.29 in the home run model to lead the team. Bush at 5.89 might be a little bit low. Model needs to catch up with the 16.1% barrel rate and all the power he's shown early. Dansby underperforming to start the season, but he'll round into form. Home runs and stolen bases are good. Matt Mervis is kind of interesting. I don't know how many times I skip Michael Bush for him on DraftKings, but if you need to save 2,100, it's a comparable bet given minor league performance, given expectations. He just hasn't performed at all at the major league level yet, so you're definitely throwing a dart. But you're getting a pretty big discount positionally to do it for another left-handed power bat. On FanDuel, you can play them both. He's 2,100 over there. He's got a 6.34 in the home run model. You can see a little bit of it coming through. Article's up on the website. It's in the article. He is... Boy, we're only here. 99 chances at the plate last year, 13.8% barrel rate, 50% hard hits. Resulted in just 3 home runs and a near total lack of production, but in 441 AAA plate appearances last year, he had 22 home runs. So there is definitely power there, and he's a lot cheaper. It's an interesting enough option. Miguel Amaya, skippable catcher, not really all that productive. Pete Crow Armstrong, though, 2,700, 2,500 across sites. Definitely interesting. 19 productive plate appearances so far, and a lot of expectations as a fairly high-end prospect. So Imanaga is a pretty big yes for me against the Mets. Jose Butto, I just think it's an awkward price, and I don't like the matchup for him. I like this Cubs team to beat him, so the Cubbies are a yes. The Mets just at the top of the lineup. Maybe you can take some shots against Imanaga. Maybe it's an Alonso or a JD Martinez one-off. Maybe it's a Tyrone Taylor one-off for very cheap pricing. Just looking, homer hunting with some of the righties. I don't know how stackable the Mets are, though. Imanaga, again, been pretty good. Giants and the Bo Sox. Got the Giants lineup handy. So starting with Cutter Crawford, projects out pretty well across sites, 9,700, 8,600. Looks pretty good against a gettable Giants team. Let's see what's in the lineup for San Francisco. 24.1% strikeout rate. That feeds his upside. He's at a 24.6 over 33 and a third. He's been pitching deep into games. That's just 6 starts. Worked 6 innings exactly in each of the last 2. Struck out 6, walked 3, gave up just 1 earned run on 7 hits to Pittsburgh at Pittsburgh. Struck out 4, walked 0, 3 earned runs and 4 total runs on 10 hits to the Cubbies. Not the greatest start in the world, but still a quality start. Only 3 earned runs in 6 innings. Did not get the win in that one. They lost that game. I like their upside to get him a win bonus. I really like, as I was saying, the Red Sox against Dalton Jeffries are kind of interesting, and I think they're underprojected. So I like the upside for a win bonus on DraftKings. He's only 8,600 over there. Seems like a really good DraftKings play, if nothing else, and I think he's very, very playable at 97 on FanDuel. Very, very good shot at a quality start, a win bonus, decent upside for strikeouts. He went 3 starts in a row with exactly 6 strikeouts. 6 innings, 5 2/3 in it, and 5 innings. One of those was against Cleveland. Very low strikeout team. One was against Baltimore. Depends on who he was facing. The Angels in Seattle were the first 2 starts. Everybody in Boston's rotation benefited from starting against the AL West on that road trip. He was very good in both of those. But even in recent action, it's held up. He's been terrific. So I think Crawford is terrific for him. We're not talking about an elite 30-something% strikeout rate, but very good enough to beat this Giants team. Last year in 129 and a third for a bigger sample, 25.6% strikeout rate, 4.04 ERA, a 4.32 xFIP. had a 12.5% swinging strike rate. So it seems like we're just seeing, a little bit of growth in terms of the runs and the performances, but he was pretty good last year too. Maybe a little bit underrated. He's also not given up a home run yet this season. Just 85.9 miles an hour of exit velo allowed, 26.1% hard hits. It's a fly ball trajectory, but he has been fantastic at inducing weak contact. So I like the play for Cutter Crawford, especially at 86 on DraftKings. If you're taking Giants against him, Jorge Soler back up to the second spot in the lineup. A little bit of a bump for his power upside. He's up to a 9.85 in the home run model. But again, it's just weak contact allowed on the other side. If anybody can get you, Jorge Soler is at least on the list. He's got 5 home runs, but just a 181 ISO. He's off to an otherwise pretty slow start. Just a 6.9% barrel rate, 39.7% hard hits, most importantly. So it's a scuffling version of Soler. Jung-Hoo Lee, 322 on base. He's stolen 2 bases. He's hit 2 home runs. He hasn't been that great. 5% worse than average creating runs. I do expect he'll be a good player in that, hit tool and on base skills with a little bit of speed and moderate power kind of range. He does have a 46% hard hit rate, but just a 3% barrel rate. Feels like an Arraez, Kwan type of a guy up at the top of the lineup, just paid to get on base, create runs in conjunction with some of these other players. Lamont Wade, terrific on base skills, a little bit of power for 3,400, 2,600 in the 3 spot. I do like Lamont Wade. If I'm going to anybody out of this lineup, he's probably second on the list. Probably Soler, Wade, Chapman as a trio. Chapman hits everything hard. Only has 4 home runs, 3 stolen bases in 124 plate appearances. The stolen bases are weird. 15% worse than average creating runs. We'll see where he ends up, but for just bat on ball, there is still major power upside. Conforto got out to a good start, down to 266, 304, 459, but has 5 home runs, has a 118 WRC+. Nice to see him back. Decent contact profile. Tyro Estrada, good mid-range power, a little bit of speed. Hasn't been great to start the season, 15% worse than average for creating runs. Mike Yastrzemski, just 2 home runs on the season, but good lefty power over a little bit of time. Tommy Murphy, believable power upside. In a small sample last year, 14.4% barrels. It was 159 plate appearances. He had 8 home runs, /293, 335, 538. Probably not that hitter, but that power hitter, if that makes sense, right? I believe that the contact profile was somewhat realistic. I just don't believe in the 290 average or anything. But the 8 home runs in 159 plate appearances, you do have that sort of cheap power upside from Tommy Murphy on any given slate. Nick Ahmed, kind of an afterthought at the bottom of the lineup. Greatly prefer the Cutter Crawford side of that head-to-head. And then on the Red Sox side, again, I want to target Dalton Jeffries here. Let's see if we have the Sox lineup. Doesn't look like we do. See what you guys are talking about. Who's your Devo? How do I feel about stacking Boston and San Fran in the same lineup? I mean, it's fine, but I wouldn't probably do it just because I like Cutter Crawford. I think he's going to have a pretty good start here. So doesn't seem great. City is no bueno for power, says Stephen Leibowitz. It's true, but that doesn't really bother Pete Alonso all that much. So if we are looking at that Boston stack, assuming this is the lineup, I really like Jarren Duran out of the top spot at 4,730, 3,000. He's got a home run and 9 stolen bases on the season. A little bit more pop in the bat. 142 plate appearances isn't a huge sample. He strikes out at a 21.8% rate. That's down a little bit from last year. He's walking a little bit more in the small sample. What I like, 45.7% hard hits over last year's 362 plate appearances. Resulted in 8 home runs. He slashed 295, 346, 482, had a 187 ISO, 24 stolen bases, 120 WRC+. I like him for a little bit more power upside as things move along. I don't think he's going to be like a 20 home run guy, but I think we get into like the mid-teens over a more complete sample. So I like the price, 47,300 against a pitcher who's, this is a tiny 2-inning sample. He got absolutely destroyed. He started a game on March 31st. This is Dalton Jeffries. Started a game on March 31st at San Diego. He lasted 2 innings in that game. He struck out 1 hitter. He gave up 2 home runs. He gave up 5 earned runs and 9 total runs on 9 hits to 16 hitters in 2 innings. That wasn't a good performance. He's pitching in AAA right now, or he was. He has okay numbers that maybe people are going to try and sell at 5,000, 5,600 here. Maybe that's why the Red Sox lineup run total is a little bit low. but he's pitching at age 28 in AAA. We know that that's an old age to be pitching in AAA. This seems like a career minor leaguer. In AAA this season, he's got a 3.44 ERA, but he's got a 5.30 xFIP. It seems gettable with a bunch of professional hitters like these Boston Red Sox. 22.7% strikeout rate, it's average. 6.7% walk rate, just fine. That's in 4 appearances at AAA this year. I don't think there's much to work with here, and I think maybe the Red Sox are a little bit underappreciated. Rafi Devers, just 5,000, 3,200, extremely cheap. There's nothing wrong with what Rafi Devers is doing so far this season. The ISO's down a little bit. The contact profile is, the hard hits are down a little bit, but the barrel rate is exactly the same as last year. We just need to get back a couple of hard hits. That's some happenstance. He's got 3 home runs. It's going to round into form. He's only played 86 games. He's had some issues with his shoulder and everything, but he is performing when he's in the lineup. He is underpriced for the upside. 10.96 in the home run model. Tyler O'Neill, 9 home runs on the season. I love his upside. Probably underrepresented at 7.88 in the home run model right now. 5,500 on DraftKings, just 3,400 on FanDuel. He's got a 20.8% barrel rate so far this year, 45.3% hard hits. His created runs 107% better than average. He's been tremendous. Wilyer Abreu's been good over 87 plate appearances. Again, meaningless sample sizes, guys, but this is what we've got to work with. He was also good in a small sample last year. 85 plate appearances last year. He had 2 home runs, stole 3 bases, created runs 35% better than average while slashing 316, 388, 474. Then we had another 87 plate appearances on top of that to lengthen the sample a little bit. So far in that sample, he's got another 2 home runs, another 4 stolen bases, a 211 ISO. He's created runs 55% better than average. 316, 391, 526 triple slash. There's a pretty good chance that Wilyer Abreu might just be a pretty good hitter. So I think he's definitely in play for 3,900, 3,200 hitting cleanup for this team. Connor Wong, player we've talked about a lot, is a cheap source of catcher power on a very infrequent basis. Out to a great start this year. 5 home runs, 343, 366, 582. That's going to go away. That's going to go away. This will come down a little bit. But I like the opportunity for Connor Wong to hit like 20 home runs this year. He hit 9 in 403 plate appearances last year, had a decent barrel rate at 9.1%. Year before that, barrel rate was 11.8%. Striking out at just a 21.1% clip, not walking at all. Last year, it was a 33.3% strikeout rate, so this is either a massive improvement or a little bit of happenstance. But I like the power upside for Connor Wong, and I like what he's done with the bat so far. So for 3,100, 2,800, very cheap access to a 5th player in that Red Sox stack as a straight line right there. I love some Bobby Dahlbeck at the bottom of the lineup. That wasn't it. Let me reload, see if it dropped. I really want to know where Dahlbeck's hitting. Nope, not in there yet. So I expect Dahlbeck. Garrett Cooper got hit on the wrist last night. Don't think he's going to be in the lineup. So really, fate is just pushing Bobby Dahlbeck into the lineup for the Red Sox at this point. They might as well accept it. In his last 2 starts, he did make 4 plate appearances in each, so diminished pinch hit risk in those 2 games. And with a shortened bench behind him, I think we get a full start. But there was a game 3 games back where he did get pinch hit for after, I think, 2 plate appearances. Might have been 3. I think he might have been 0 for 2 with a walk. But I think it was Pablo Reyes swapped in for him. So it is a little bit of a risk at the bottom of the lineup in the 8th spot. It would be better if he's up over, somewhere around here. So we'll see where he lands. But at 2,200, 2,100, there is power upside for Bobby Dahlbeck. I will argue with anybody who says otherwise. 6.53 in the home run model. Hasn't done anything at the plate yet this year. Last year, in a small sample of 53 plate appearances, he hit 1 home run. The year before, in 353 plate appearances, he hit 12 home runs. Going back in time further than that, damn it. In 2021, in 453 major league plate appearances, Bobby Dahlbeck did hit 25 home runs with a 254 ISO and a 107 WRC+. There is realistic power there. He is one of these 3 true outcomes hitters where you get a lot of strikeouts, you get a good amount of walks, and you get power. A lot of that is going back to his minor league track record and the hitter that he's been over time at every level. There is just expectation baked into that. Right now, he's striking out at a 48.2% clip over 56 plate appearances, only walking 5.4%. Last year in the tiny sample, 52.8% strikeout rate and 7.5% walks. Know what you're buying for your 2,200, 2,100, but he is very, very cheap for the power upside against a AAA career pitcher at best. Rob Refsnyder, career journeyman, off to a decent start this year. More here to hit against lefties and, on an every now and then platoon kind of a basis. But if he's in the lineup, he's cheap. He's playable enough. Oddly good barrel rate right now. But again, we're talking about 36 plate appearances. Center Rafaela off to a terrible start, but a little bit of counting stat upside, and supposed to be a good player. Shortstop and outfield eligibility on DraftKings for cheap. Outfield, second base, and shortstop on FanDuel for cheap. So pretty big yes to the Red Sox against Dalton Jeffries. Pretty big yes to Cutter Crawford against the Giants. I think the Giants loosely are playable because there are some bats that I do like, and they're very, very cheap. It wouldn't be a target stack. It wouldn't be a high priority stack for me. I don't think they ranked out very well on the stacks board if you check that. But I do like Jorge Soler, Lamont Wade, Matt Chapman, a little bit with Mikey Conforto, Thairo Estrada, and then I think Jung Hoo Lee is playable. So there's playable bats there. But would I stack them in the Red Sox in the same lineup? Not my favorite approach to this one. You're targeting a game with just a 8-run implied total. When we've got a 9, we've got 3 9s to work with, an 8.5. So, second lowest on the board. Nationals, Rangers, 446. Reminder, the slate starts at 6:35. We'll be out of here by an hour before that at least. Let's see if we've got these lineups. We've got both these lineups. How about that? So I mentioned it at the top of the show. C.J. Abrams, after massive struggles against same-handed pitching last year, has been fantastic in a small sample so far this year against same-handed pitching. So I think if anybody's going to get to Andrew Heaney, C.J. Abrams is a pretty good candidate. The bad news is everybody who's going to roster Nationals is going to include C.J. Abrams. So he's going to be pretty popular among those that roster Nationals. I imagine they're drawing some popularity because everybody knows that we target Andrew Heaney. But what I was saying at the top of the show about this team, I think it kind of applies here in that I think we're only getting the Heaney bonus. Actually, they don't look all that popular. Wow. All right. If RG's right, then somebody let me know. Or you don't have to tell me any numbers, but oops. Pop this back on the screen. Are the Nationals projected for popularity on other sites? Because right now only Senzel and Joey Meneses are even in double digits FanDuel projections, but it's probably the same on DraftKings for RG's projections, which is pretty surprising. I thought the public would be going to Nationals given how good they were against lefties last year, so that's in people's heads. I've even said it a few times already this year, and it's not true this year so far. But to flip that on its head, if they're not popular, then I do think maybe it's an interesting spot for guys like C.J. Abrams, Jesse Winker, just kind of avoiding the mediocre righty bats who are the popular ones, which is it's really interesting. Let me know. Hey, Carlos Soto, what's going on, buddy? Travis had around 70% web last night, hedged a Boston stack, fortunately. Good. I'm glad. Always a good idea to hedge a little bit if you take big positions on pitchers, even the most talented pitchers in the game. And yeah, wasn't a great start for Webby last night. Still one of the best pitchers in baseball. With that in mind, probably watch Zach Wheeler get blown up by the Angels today. How's he doing so far? After I was giving him a glowing review earlier off the cuff. So all right. So if the Nationals are going to be low on, let's talk about that real quick. So far this season, it's only 34 plate appearances, but again, he struggled badly against same-handed pitching last year. C.J. Abrams right now, in that small sample, 406, 441, 875, creating runs 161% better than average. That's silly, but he's got 3 home runs already against same-handed pitching. Stolen a base, getting on at a 441 clip. Tiny sample, but that's a big improvement. If he maintains that uptick, he's been terrific against both hands. But if he's under-owned because people are worried about a lefty-lefty against Andrew Heaney, who gives up everything, that makes C.J. Abrams now interesting to me. Nick Senzel is projected to be popular in those projections. He's very, very cheap. He's got 5 home runs. He hits right-handed. There is power upside for sure. 5.46 in the home run model. He's making immense contact in terms of barrels. Not a great hard hit rate. We know that Nick Senzel has raw skills, but never really rounded into the player he was supposed to be. A lot of that's due to injury. I think he's playable, but if he's popular, I also think he's skippable. He's very, very cheap, though. Jesse Winker at 3,900, 3,100. Lefty so far for Winker this year. has been not good. 42 plate appearances, 125, 310, 250. That's a mess. But overall, Jesse Winker's been really good. He's getting on at a 381 clip, 132 WRC plus. If you like the Nationals because you think they're going to crush Andrew Heaney, then you have to expect that Jesse Winker is going to probably get some shots against a righty out of the bullpen at some point. So it doesn't take him off the board. And if he's going to be completely unowned at 3,900, 3,100, hitting third in a lineup that you expect to go off, I don't think he's completely inept. I don't think he's as bad as he's been against left-handed pitching. And again, Andrew Heaney, not exactly a premium lefty. Meneses is going to be popular. He hasn't been good. He was okay with the stick last year at 275, 321, 401, but he only hit 13 home runs, which is the same 13 home runs that he hit in just 240 plate appearances the year before. He was more of a power bat that year, but he did slash 324, 367, 563 with a 239 ISO. If we could ever get that guy back, he'd be a tremendous play here. This version of Joey Meneses, he's got a 7.54 on the home run model, but he hasn't hit any in 109 plate appearances yet this year. He's got a .031 ISO, just barreling the ball 3.9% of the time, but does have a 47.4% hard hit rate. And again, going up against Andrew Heaney, who's giving up an 11.8% barrel rate, 45.6% hard hits, 92 miles an hour of exit velo, and 4.9% home runs so far this year. He's given up exactly 2 home runs in each of his last 2 appearances. He gave up a home run 2 starts before that against Houston. Those 2 home runs came against Seattle and Atlanta. He did strike out 7, but that was against Seattle. Walked 0, gave up 2 home runs and 4 earned runs in 6 innings. That was probably his best start of the year. Once upon a time, Andrew Heaney was like more of a give and take kind of a pitcher with decent strikeout numbers. Last year, 23.6%. Year before, in a very small sample, was a massive 35.5%. That's a bit of an outlier. But you can see, even in these years, he was very, very targetable for home run upside and for power. So they're going to be underowned. That puts it back on the board a little bit. Continuing on, Ildemaro Vargas, I imagine probably pretty low owned. Tiny sample this year, just 27 plate appearances, 292, 370, 375. Hasn't been bad, 116 WRC plus. Again, collectively, the active roster has been 10% worse than average creating runs against lefties this season with a very weak triple slash. But some of these guys have been successful. And again, C.J. Abrams is one of them, and he's not going to be that popular. If Ildemaro Vargas is somewhat productive overall in 57 plate appearances, he's got a 38% better than average mark for run creation. Last year, he slashed 252, 304, 363, but was 19% worse than average for runs. So he's just, moderately playable for the money. But as a guy who's hitting 5th for very cheap pricing at interesting infield positioning, second base primarily on DraftKings, it's not off the board against a bad lefty. Alex Call's not that good. Another righty bat. 9 plate appearances, off to a good start. 4 of those came against the lefty, and he was got similar numbers, but nothing to really work with there. Trey Lipscomb, pretty decent. Another right-handed bat, 3,100, 2,800. Third base, I don't know that I'd go there with my third baseman too many times, but playable if you're stacking this team. Riley Adams was immensely successful against left-handed pitching last year. So far in 18 plate appearances this year, he has 0 home runs, 1 run scored, a 22% strikeout rate with a .059 ISO, and he's slashing 118, 170, 167, 176 with a -3 WRC plus. So over the first few plate appearances of the season, he hasn't been great against lefties. It still does have a pretty nice little barrel rate in his 59 plate appearances. Has hit 2 home runs. They both came against righties. But I think there's upside for Riley Adams as a sneaky catcher option. And Jacob Young, a little bit of steals upside, a little bit of on-base skill, maybe an interesting wraparound play if you're stacking Nationals. So maybe something like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then pick your poison on DraftKings, or just a straight up 4-man with those 4 guys on FanDuel. It's a weird low-owned approach to a very cheap, pretty bad team facing a pitcher who gives up a ton of power, a ton of earned runs. Wouldn't play Heaney, I don't think. 7,200. He projects out like moderately okay for the money. 6,000 on DraftKings. That's the one where I question it a little bit. Like I said, I think I'd rather have Heaney 500 less and take my shot against these Nats with a guy who has struck out hitters in the major leagues for a significant amount of time in the past versus this guy, even against the Rockies, for 500 more. I think I would take my shot with Heaney on DraftKings. It's not recommended, but among the bargain bin guys, if you're not considering Luis Gil at 78, you got to at least put him on the board. Again, 21% strikeouts, but a 6.26 ERA, a 5.04 xFIP. All this power that he's given up. 11.2% swinging strikes against this team. Maybe a little bit of upside, but they've only got a collective 18% strikeout rate. He's got an 82.9 via Stuff Plus. Pretty bad. Trevor Williams is super targetable with Rangers bats. It's funny, among like the bad cheapo pitchers, he's actually got some of the best numbers in terms of a 2.70 ERA, a 4.14 xFIP, an okay 18.8% strikeout rate over 5 starts, 26 and 2/3. I just don't think he hasn't given up a home run yet. Hasn't given up that much premium contact. I just don't think any of it's real. Over 144 and a third last year, he struck out just 16.8%, had a 5.55 ERA with a 5.22 xFIP, gave up a 5.16% home run rate on 10.2% barrels, had a terrible whip, didn't induce any swinging strikes, had a terrible CSW. The swinging strikes is exactly the same. The CSW is up a little bit, so he's thrown a few more called strikes to get these 2 bonus points of strikeout rate. 2 years ago, had a 22.6% strikeout rate, decent ERA, decent xFIP, but just, I don't know, I don't think there's anything real about this. Stuff Plus doesn't like it at all in terms of the arsenal. Seems super gettable with a really good Rangers lineup that continues to have a ridiculously underpriced Nathaniel Lowe. Can we talk about this again? I put it in the article, but out of the gates, 37 plate appearances, he's at 333, 405, 455. So there's just that on the surface, 49% better than average creating runs with a home run on the board already. So just right there, he should probably be priced up a couple bucks by now. But last year, 17 home runs and 724 plate appearances. All right, not great output for power, just a 152 ISO, but still created runs 14% better than average. Got on base at a 360 clip, hit 262. That's a productive player in the 3 spot among all these star players on this team. And then the year before, he was a star. 191 ISO is good. It's slightly below great. But 27 home runs, /302, 358, 492. Created runs 43% better than average to lead that group. That's a tremendous, tremendous hitter. They just have the price wrong on Nathaniel Lowe. So happy to go to that. Definitely needs to be a part of a lot of Ranger stacks. I expect he's going to be pretty popular in this spot. He's got an 8 in the home run model, projects out really well behind Marcus Semien and Corey Seager, both of whom are underpriced. Seager's going to be crazy popular. He's the home run pick of the day at 12.54. If I had realized how popular he was going to be, I probably wouldn't have made him that. I might have taken somebody from the Red Sox or something. But is what it is. Only 2 home runs on the board. This is why I took him, because I figured, he's struggling. Maybe it would be unpopular. 80 WRC plus, just a .075 ISO, just a 37.2% hard hit rate so far. But we know that Corey Seager is a superstar shortstop. Take him while he's cheap. Happy to get him. 53.36 for Marcus Semien. Price is down a little bit. He hasn't been bad. Creating runs 17% better than average. A 194 ISO, 5 homers, a stolen base. Adolis Garcia, 8 home runs, 4 stolen bases, 292 ISO, creating runs 59% better than average. Evan Carter hasn't been terrific, but the price is pretty cheap at $4,200, considering a 10.3% barrel rate, 46.2% hard hit rate in his 75 plate appearances last year, on top of the 5 home runs that he's hit this year with a 242 ISO, 118 WRC plus this production from last year. That's a pretty stellar 180 plate appearances. So I think the price is a little bit cheap for Evan Carter just based on a low average, a low on base so far this year. The strikeouts have come down. The walks are down a little bit compared to, again, a very small sample last year. I don't really see a lot of justification for his price to be $4,200 on DraftKings. 34 on FanDuel is about right. This is low. Josh Smith playing over his head, but 317, 417, 500. You can't really argue with the results so far. 164 WRC plus, 2 home runs. I don't think he's that hitter. I think that's reflected by his contact profile here. But very cheap if you're stacking this team. He's got triple position eligibility. Dual on DraftKings. Very playable. Wyatt Langford, underperforming so far. 80 WRC plus, but a very high-end rookie they've got a lot of faith in, and he's very cheap. Jonah Heim for $4,000. It's a bad spot in the lineup, but there's a lot of power there for a catcher. So I like Jonah Heim. 3 home runs on the season, 90 WRC plus and 95 plate appearances. Leody Taveras out of the gate pretty weak this season. 1 home run, 2 stolen bases after 14 and 14 last year. So Heaney on DraftKings, maybe if you're desperate for value bin darts, maybe you could do it. You're at least getting a gettable opponent, but I greatly prefer the National side. It's just Nick Senzel and Joey Meneses are drawing a lot of ownership. Everybody else is under-owned, and CJ Abrams is potentially spectacularly under-owned for this spot. So I've come around to liking the Nats a little bit more than I did before. It still is a bad lineup, but maybe we could get there a little bit more in some interesting configurations against Heaney. The Rangers are a very big yes for me against Trevor Williams. I think that's a really good spot. Like Trevor Williams to give up his first home run of the year. Guardians and the Astros. We've got both of these as well. Beautiful. Fantasy Labs continues not to know which ballparks have roofs on them. That's fine. By the way, hilarious note from Mr. Roth in his weather report today related to the next game that we'll talk about. Pretty solid Tommy Boy reference. But that's for the next game. Right now, this one, Tristan McKenzie on the bump for the Guardians going up against Justin Verlander. Verlander projects out all right, but not great. It's like good, not great projection. For 10,000, makes him a little bit bigger of a question mark. Oops, that one. This is perfectly fine. Again, remember the Cutter Crawford belongs higher. I'm going to resort this now by FanDuel, just so that we can look at that correctly. All right, so there's a good handful of pitchers above Justin Verlander in this one. Why do I want to pay 10,000 for him when I can pay these prices for Imanaga, who I like better against the softer matchup? Corbin Burns against the tougher matchup, but with more upside. And Yamamoto against the tough matchup, but for way less money. Luis Gil in a tough spot. Cutter Crawford in a good spot for less money. Just makes Verlander a little bit more sticky. That said, I think he's got tremendous upside. And at 9,200, I do like it on DraftKings for the money. Just a little bit high price for the spot because the Guardians, 18.3% strikeout rate for this confirmed lineup so far this year. Last year, 18.8%. We know who they are. We know what they do. That's put the ball in play, get on base, play station-to-station baseball. A little bit of power showing through this year. Everybody steals bases. They're very good at just frustrating pitchers. And Justin Verlander, not wanting to get rattled by some base hits. But that could definitely ruin his day pretty quickly. So far this year, 1.74 ERA, but a 3.85 xFIP in his 2 starts, 10 1/3, 26.8% strikeout rate, but he's walked a few. That amounts to a 6-inning start against the Nationals in his first game. He struck out 4, walked 0, gave up a home run, 2 earned runs on 4 hits, faced 21 hitters in that one. Against the Cubbies at Chicago, he only went 4 1/3. 7 strikeouts, but he walked 4. No earned runs, only 3 hits. If you get that kind of a start for 10 grand, that's going to burn you. I do think 6 innings are on the board, but he's got to pitch really efficiently and really effectively against a team that doesn't really let you do that all that often. So I don't love the spot for Justin Verlander. I think there's a very, very clear path for him to get to the top of the board and be the most successful starter on the day, at the same time as not really liking the spot. I hope that makes sense. I know it sounds like I'm just playing both sides of it, but I hope that makes sense. And especially with him priced at just 92 on DraftKings, there's an even broader path for him to succeed. He's one of the best pitchers, if not the best pitcher of the last 20, 25 years in baseball. So there's clearly a path. Even at age 41, he's had 2 good starts to open the season. I just don't love the matchup for him where he needs to pitch efficiently because, again, just coming back from injury, just here for 2 starts so far. So I don't think there's much beyond 6 innings for him, and I think he needs to be good to pitch the 6. I don't know how much I roster the Guardians on the other side of that equation. I do think they're a good team. This lineup's been very interesting so far this year. They didn't really get the full engine going last year. This is what they were trying to do last year and didn't really make it fully happen. Part of that was Stephen Kwan underperforming a little bit. He's at 350, 395, 483 to start the season, creating runs 56% better than average. Andres Jimenez at 280, 347, 374, finally got his first home run. He's got 4 stolen bases. He's created runs 13% better than average. Jose Ramirez arguably underperforming with just a 102 WRC plus, a 185 ISO. He's got 5 home runs and 4 steals, just a 286 on base. Everything about that is going to go up. Still correctly costs $4,000 on FanDuel, $58 on DraftKings. The price is about right. Josh Naylor at 5,000, 3,600, 7 home runs, 2 steals, a 155 WRC plus, 272 ISO, crushing the ball from the left side of the plate. Very good hitter. Just tough matchup for the Guardians. David Fry at 38.27. He's had a productive 60 plate appearances so far this year, 162 WRC plus. Will Brennan, Esteban Florial in the next two spots in the outfield, couple of cheap lefty bats on both sites. Neither one is really performing that great, but each has 3 home runs so far this year. Florial has a 271 ISO and a 137 WRC plus in his 56 plate appearances. Maybe a little something there. It is a player that I started out the year saying, I'm kind of curious to see what he's got after being just stuck in the minors for the Yankees for so many years. Tyler Freeman, like I mentioned yesterday, just a couple years ago, was their top overall prospect, referred to as a DJ LeMahieu type bat in the MLB.com scouting report. As I said, also said yesterday, 3 home runs, 3 steals, 205, 302, 361. The triple slash looks like current version of DJ LeMahieu, 93 WRC plus. We'll see if he comes around. Low strikeout rate so far. Low strikeout rate in a small cup of coffee last year. It's very, very cheap. Outfield on DraftKings. I think he's more interesting as a $2,800 second baseman on FanDuel. But that said, I don't like him better than $3,000 Andres Jimenez in the second spot in this lineup. Brian Rocchio is just here for defense at shortstop. If you're taking the Astros, you're drawing down against Tristan McKenzie, who lasted just 4 innings in his last start, but did manage to strike out 7. He walked 2. He gave up 2 earned runs on 6 hits. That was against Boston. He went 5 innings in the start against the Athletics before that. Struck out 6, walked 3. Gave up a home run, but just the 1 earned run on 3 hits. Those were his 2 best starts of the season. In a 5 2/3 inning start on April 8th against the White Sox, he only allowed 3 hits, no runs, but he struck out just 2 and walked 4. The game before that was his first game of the year. That was at Seattle. We know how bad they are. He only struck out 2, walked 2, gave up a home run, 4 earned on 4 hits, faced just 17 hitters over 3 1/3. And then in between all this, he faced the Yankees, just lasted 4 innings, gave up 5 earned, 6 total runs, gave up a homer, struck out just 1 and walked 6. That's how you get to a 17.7% strikeout rate with a 16.7% walk rate, a 4.91 ERA, and a much, much worse 6.11 xFIP. Stuff plus is below average, not terribly so, but below average, just a 9.1% swinging strike rate. Again, maybe rounding into form for the strikeouts in the last 2, but we're dealing with a lot of short starts and a brutal opponent. The Astros have a 17.7% strikeout rate so far this year. Last year, the guys who were in the show had a 17.2% strikeout rate. It's a fantastic baseball team. I don't care what their win-loss record says. Altuve, Bregman, Alvarez, Tucker. I'll throw Pena into the mix. Very, very good players. I'm basing that on Pena from 2 years ago and a hot start this year. I'm not as confident in him. I'm not as confident in this version of Alex Bregman, but he got on the board last night. Had a decent game. He's got a home run and a stolen base on the board now. 69 WRC plus. It's up a little bit from yesterday. Might be the spark to start his turnaround. 4,600, 2,700. He's cheap enough to find out. 7.82% home run, 7.82 in the home run model. He's only striking out 12.4% of the time, drawing an 8.8% walk rate. Last year he was at a 12% strikeout rate with 12.7% walks. Alex Bregman's still in there somewhere. Altuve's got 7 home runs. Alvarez has 7 home runs. Tucker has 7 home runs and 5 stolen bases. They all have ISOs well over 200. They all have WRC plus marks way above average. None of them strikes out at even more than 15.2%, which is Tucker. He's also walking at a 15.9% clip. He's been outrageous to start the season. Alvarez is one of my favorite players in baseball. 15.5% barrel rate, 49.5% hard hit rate. Just a tremendous, tremendous hitter. Tucker's right there with him so far this season. Pena at 4,500, 3,000, very cheap for a hot start at shortstop. 327, 367, 451, creating runs 38% better than average. 3 homers, 4 steals, making pretty decent contact with a 41.7% hard hit rate. Just striking out 14.2% of the time, and a very low walk rate means he's putting the ball in play all the time. Kind of interesting for DFS. John Singleton hasn't been productive, 2,600, 2,200. He's very cheap. There is believable lefty power upside lurking in there somewhere against a bad against a very good pitcher, very talented guy who has scuffled along so far this season. So I don't love Singleton in this spot. I think he's gettable for strikeouts for McKenzie, but he's very, very cheap. Victor Caratini in a catcher, 3,200, 2,400. 2 home runs on the season, 314, 368, 571 over 38 plate appearances is what it is. He's cheap. Joey Lurperfido, 2,800, 2,200 is pretty cheap. He went 1 for 5 in his first start, but scored a run, drove in 2. Only a 12 WRC plus. That's weird. You would think that would be higher given that There were some runs involved in that, but however that comes together, that is obviously one game sample. He had 13 home runs in AAA so far this year, so that was leading all of professional baseball when he got his call up. Definitely earned his spot in the show. We'll see what he does, but 2,800, 2,200 hits from the left side of the plate. Kind of an interesting bat late in the lineup. Mauricio Dubon, just a positional Swiss Army knife of a hitter. So Verlander's definitely a yes. I don't want to undersell Justin Verlander's ability to get to the highest ceiling on the slate. It's definitely there, but it's a challenging strikeout matchup. It's a challenging matchup to pitch efficiently against this team. So I think there's a shot that he gets a little bit short of a quality start. 9,200, definitely worthwhile on the DraftKings slate. I love the opportunity to book the win bonus. I don't question the ability to get 5 innings out of him and come out of this with a lead in 5 innings. It's the 6th inning that I question for 10,000 on FanDuel. Much, much better option on DraftKings. Definitely playable on FanDuel, though. Tristan McKenzie, a lot less so at 72, 77. I just hate the matchup for a struggling pitcher. Even if the strikeouts have come around, I hate the short starts. I hate the upside against this lineup. So McKenzie's kind of a no, even at price. There is a ceiling there for 7,200, but you're really rolling some bad dice with that one, so I don't like it. I think the Guardians are playable against Verlander, but just saying the words against Verlander just kind of puts a bad taste in my mouth as I'm saying it, so I don't love the spot. Last game up, 5-11. Perfectly fine on time. You guys rock, by the way. Hit the like button, whoever's out there still. Hit the subscribe if you haven't already. Larry C. called it. As Roth said, referencing the bee incident yesterday in his weather report, he was quoting Tommy Boy from the famous scene where they're pretending to be stung by bees to fool the cops in a traffic stop because they were drinking. Because it was the 90s and drinking and driving, everybody knew it was bad by then, but it wasn't crazy bad like it is now. I mean, it was, but that wasn't how it was viewed, and it was viewed as like kind of funny if you try and get away with it, which was weird. But that was the 90s. A lot of things were like that in the 90s. Like, we know this is bad. We can see that in the future people aren't going to be allowed to do this. But right now we're still trying to get away with it. That was basically the theme of a lot of the 90s for stuff like that. But yes, they're huge and they're sting crazy. Your firearms are useless against them. That was the situation in Arizona last night with the beehive on the net. If you missed it, again, pretty hilarious video of the beekeeper. And then they let him throw the first pitch in the game, which is pretty awesome. There's a roof, mama. Any of the game, don't go by labs for weather. They don't know where the roofs are. So this game, last game up, don't look like we have the Dodgers and the Diamondbacks lineups yet. Island game is the best way to put that, I guess. 9:40 start in this one. All the other games start by 8:10. So you'll be well underway, and the scores will be interesting. And then a little late night hammer coming here. Jordan Montgomery, 8,700 across sites. We discussed him yesterday because we thought he was going to pitch. The thing I don't like about Montgomery, he's a very, very good major league pitcher, but it's just the lack of strikeout upside against a very, very low strikeout Dodgers team where even if he limits them with his talent to just 3 or 4 runs, he doesn't have the ability to really claw back any of that scoring via strikeouts against this team. So it's a questionable spot for Montgomery. I don't love it. Just kind of lands in the lost in the middle in the $8,700 price range too. It's not a value. It's not a high price. He could succeed, but there's a lot smaller of a path to success than like a Verlander against Cleveland. So it just looks a little bit shaky for Montgomery, same as yesterday. But it's the same kind of thing where I expect, it could be just a collision in the middle. Very good lineup that limits strikeouts against a low strikeout but very good pitcher. Just equals like, all right, they put 3 to 5 runs on Montgomery. He went 6 or 7 and didn't have a great DFS start. Either team wins or loses the game, but nobody's great for DFS. I could see that. I can also see that going the other way against Yamamoto. As I said at the top of the show, I do think Yamamoto's got a much higher ceiling given his current 31.9% strikeout rate, a 12.3% swinging strike rate, and outrageously good 34.2% CSW. Yamamoto's got a much clearer ceiling, and let's face facts, the Diamondbacks lineup is worse than the Dodgers lineup while still being very, very good. So at 9,600, 9,000, I really like the spot for Yamamoto to succeed. He could easily fail. it is a spot where he could get got for 4 or 5 runs. Maybe he doesn't have a great start, goes 6, strikes out a few, but gives up some runs and lands somewhere in the middle of the board. I can absolutely see that, but he's been really sharp. Struck out 7 in his last performance, went 6 innings, gave up just 4 hits, no earned runs at Washington. Game before that, gave up 3 earned runs, 4 runs total on 7 hits, went 6 innings, but struck out 9 against the Mets. Gave up a home run in that one. Gave up 2 home runs in the game before that against the Padres. Also gave up 3 earned runs in that one. Struck out 6, walked 1, 4 hits in that one, went 5. I like that he stretched out a little bit. He went the first start of the year was a disaster. Then he went 5 innings in each of the 3 next starts, his actual first 3 starts of the year. 2 of those were shutout performances, gave up 2 hits to St. Louis, 3 hits to the Cubbies, no runs in either of those, struck out 5 Cards and 8 Cubs. And then in a 5-inning start against the Padres, the one I was about to get to a minute ago, 3 earned runs, 4 hits, 6 strikeouts, 1 walk, 2 home runs in that game. A little bit of an outlier for power there. And then just a meltdown in his first major league performance. That was in the Korea series back on March 21st, before the season really started. Just lasted 1 inning, faced all 9, gave up 4 hits and 5 earned runs, walked 1, struck out 2. It's kind of unfair to even judge that performance at this point. He's been tremendous in basically most of his other performances, even with the earned runs and a little bit of power in a couple outlier games there. He's got 3 games in which he gave up no runs at all and a total of 9 hits across 16 innings with a bunch of strikeouts. So I think the ceiling is a lot more real than what we saw as a potential basement. And even with that complete meltdown in that first game, over 6 starts in 28 innings, he's got a 3.54 ERA, a 2.65 xFIP. 31.9% strikeouts, 5.2% walk rate is terrific. He's given up a little bit of premium contact, which I don't love. That's where we could run into some trouble against this Diamondbacks team. 12.5% barrels is really high. He's kept the ball down. He's a little bit difficult to square up and to gain launch against, which is what's the saving grace here. And if he continues to do that, we see a lot of pitchers be effective despite giving up some hard hits and some exit velo just by keeping launch angle down. So it might just be one of those guys. Stuff Plus really likes him. Hasn't had an issue with the home runs outside of the 3 that he's given up. It's just 3 home runs in 6 games. So perfectly fine there. I think he's a little bit underpriced given where he projects. 3rd on the board behind Imanaga and Burns. Could arguably be the top pitcher on the board for a easy price. So I like the spot. A little bit threatened by the Diamondbacks lineup though. With Jake McCarthy in the leadoff spot, as we saw yesterday, he 2 years ago was effective at getting on base, stealing bases, created some runs. Last year, a little bit down. This year, an okay start. 3 stolen bases, 99 WRC plus. Let's say the jury's out after 71 plate appearances. But if he's leading off again, it's kind of an interesting hitter for 3,600, 2,400, just because he connects directly into these guys who are all pretty cheap for their talent. Lourdes Gurriel at 5,000, 3,400, 254, 300, 426 to start the season. 5% better than average creating runs. 5 home runs, 2 steals. Ketel Marte at 306, 357, 508. He's a star second baseman. Probably the best second baseman, or second best behind Ozzie Albies. Is there anybody who's not thinking of? He's on that list anyway. One of the best second basemen in baseball. 202 ISO, 137 WRC plus in the small sample this year. Tremendous year last year. Christian Walker, not your typical all or nothing power bat. He's got 7 home runs. He's got a 212 ISO. Last year he had 33 home runs to lead this team. Had a 239 ISO. But typically low strikeout rates. Last year just 19.2%. This year up a little bit at 23.4, but this was in the high 20s just 10 days ago and is coming down pretty quickly, starting to normalize back to this. Walks are up so far this year. Plenty of barrels, tons of hard hits. Really like Christian Walker at first base, and I think he's dramatically underpriced at $4,900 on DraftKings, even against this pitcher. That's just a really cheap price for this hitter. $3,400 is correct-ish on FanDuel, but all 3 of these guys could be a little bit more expensive, and these 2 guys probably should be a little bit more expensive. Jock Peterson off to a decent start, 288, 436, 492, a 203 ISO, created run 64% better than average in just 79 plate appearances, getting bat on ball pretty effectively, just 4,100, 2,700. We know Jock has lefty power. Junior Suarez, pretty bad start to his season, but we know there's righty power for him. 4,000, 2,900, not probably the best way to occupy your third base slot right now, but a playable part for power upside, 5.28 in the home run model against a pitcher who's been giving up some barrels again, giving up some hard hits, but not a lot of launch. Gabriel Moreno, pretty playable catcher at just 3,700. The results haven't been great this season, but I know there's a good hitter there. Corbin Carroll, I know he's a star caliber hitter. He certainly was last year, but right now dipped pretty significantly. There's some people in the advanced metrics community whose article I didn't bother to click on that were kind of calling him out as maybe a pretender last season. I don't really think that. And again, I didn't click on the article, so I'm not sure why they're saying it, but maybe I'll go back and look at it. But right now, I think you're just getting a cheap multi-category player. Late in the lineup, sure, if he's sitting down here, 5,100, 2,900, tons and tons of struggles against a very good pitcher. But that's how we get to low ownership on a star caliber player sometimes. Blaze Alexander, I think, is interesting. 3,800, 3,000, 311, 400, 541, 230 ISO, 3 home runs, a stolen base. Doing exactly what he was expected to do so far with better average and better on base early in his career over 70 plate appearances. If he keeps it up, he's going to be interesting. He's very, very cheap at shortstop. Like it if he's hitting up here too. And then even against Jordan Montgomery, the Dodgers are the Dodgers. It's a spot where maybe they'll be a little bit under-owned compared to where they should be. You've got 3 superstars at the top and an absolute star catcher to go with them. Right now, Will Smith at 362, 403, 543 is performing just as well as any of these guys. 164 WRC plus for him. 3 home runs. Freddie Freeman's got 2 home runs, a 148 WRC plus. His power's been out a little bit, but 302, 424, 431. There's nothing to argue with about Freddie Freeman. Ohtani's got 7 homers and 5 steals. Mookie's got 6 homers and 8 steals, a 211 WRC plus, a 184 WRC plus. Don't need to sell these guys. Teoscar Hernandez, tons and tons of power, a lot of strikeouts. 32.6% strikeout rate for him. Max Muncy, if he's in the lineup against the lefty, 30% strikeout rate. A lot of walks, a lot of power out of both of those hitters. Both very, very playable in this spot, and they're a little bit cheap at 48.45, more correctly priced on FanDuel for their power upside. Enrique Hernandez, Miguel Rojas, both somewhat skippable at the bottom of the lineup, but as we saw yesterday, Rojas out to a decent start so far this year, 200 ISO, 131 WRC plus, a couple of homers. And then Andy Pajes, over 55 plate appearances, 2 home runs already, a 220 ISO. Been very interesting so far. Still very cheap, 2,900 on FanDuel, just 33 on DraftKings. So definitely not somebody to skip that many times if you're stacking up a bunch of Dodgers. I just don't love the spot against Montgomery. They do have a good high run total. 4.89 is the 3rd highest on the board. The 2nd highest is the Marlins. So if you want to throw that one out the window, then it's the 2nd highest on the board. I just don't know that Monty lets them get more than that. Right? Like I can see the Dodgers getting their 4.8, 4 or 5 runs, like I said before. I don't see the Dodgers necessarily going off for like 8, 9 runs to chase Montgomery after, 5 innings and then going into the bullpen. It seems like more of a 4 or 5 run type of a spot where, the Vegas line is just correct without a ton of ceiling. Montgomery's a good pitcher. None of that is to say that the Dodgers can't do that to him, though. It's obviously on the board, and I definitely think they're playable. That was it. One last time on the pitcher board. Then we're going to get out of here. We're going to get an update in because it is 5:23 and the slate starts at 6:35. Just for your peace of mind, Mamba. Directly from Wikipedia. They've got a roof, I promise. So, top of the board, Imanaga. I really like that spot against a somewhat soft Mets team. You got Pete Alonso. You got a couple hitters in there for sure. But he's been terrific and got some strikeout upside, 10.398. I think they're appropriate prices. They're high, but I think they're appropriate. Larry likes Globe Life Field. I've heard it's a nice stadium. White Sox Royal stacks was apparently what you needed in the early slate per Hoosier. That's fun. I'm sure a ton of people arrived at that. Probably a pretty good result for the sim players. Of course, Mom. Excuse me. Corbin Burns against my Yankees. Again, Yanks can get to anybody, but Corbin Burns is utterly elite most of the time. 10.6, 9.4. You're paying a pretty healthy price for him against a very good team, but love the upside. Projects out very well. Highly, highly playable. Again, if I was building 20 lineups, I'd probably have like 6 shares of him, 6 of Imanaga, 6 of Yamamoto, and then go from there. Luis Gil, very playable against, Luis Gil at 7,800 is playable based on how everybody else on this slate is priced. He's got very good strikeout upside, very bad walk downside, very bad run potential downside against an excellent Baltimore lineup. I think I put that correctly. Yamamoto against Arizona, we just went through, but at 9,600, I like him a lot. Cutter Crawford against San Francisco. The correct projection is 14.82 on DraftKings, not 10.82. It's corrected on the site already. I'll get it corrected in the model, whatever the problem is. But at 9,700, 8,600, particularly on DraftKings, I think that's a very, very interesting spot. Justin Verlander, tons of ceiling. Just a challenging spot, and again, has to pitch efficiently to get his 6 innings in, just based on his just recent comeback to the mound. So I think it's a little bit challenging given the matchup for Verlander at 10,000. At 9,200, I have no real issues with it on DraftKings because I think the 5 innings is easily in play, and I think the Astros have a very good shot to win that game. Jose Butto is probably the cut line for like realistic opportunity. Don't love the matchup against the Cubs, and I think it's an awkward price fit at 82. He's not exactly cheap because you've got Luis Gil there with similar opportunity. It's not exactly expensive. He's got an okay upside, but not great. Probably pitching above his head a little bit. Roderick Munoz, I really think that the correct approach is to target him with Rocky's bats, given the ownership on DraftKings. He's really popular, 6,500. I get it because of the value, but it doesn't seem to be a lot there. He did have one good start over 5 innings against the Cubs, so we'll give him that. But there's not a lot there in the minor leagues. So I think you can get there with some Rockies bats for very cheap, especially if they're under-owned. I would play it like across 150 lineups. I can see just cause for getting there at 65. But I think I'd rather look at Heaney at 6,000. Oddly, feels really weird to say, against the Nationals. It's 500 cheaper. Just makes me a little bit more interested in a pitcher who, again, as bad as he is on a lot of starts, 6-8 times a year, he's going to go out there and have a pretty good start. And over time, those strikeout numbers were very good at certain points in his career, not too long ago. I think there's more ceiling for Heaney at 6,000. There's also a huge basement filled with spikes and bears and lions and fire and just demons and things to poke you with. It's bad. You don't want to play Heaney. But I think between the two, 6,500 for Munoz versus 6,000 for Heaney, terrible teams on either side. I don't know. C.J. Abrams is the best opposing player in either of those lineups, and Heaney's got to get through him. But otherwise, I don't know. 500 less, very, very close. Montgomery, just tough matchup against the Dodgers. I don't love it to work out in his favor, but I think it's just, again, a collision of like middle. Tristan McKenzie, I think, is very gettable for the Astros lineup. He is really cheap, and the strikeouts have rounded into form, but I think we get a short start, and the Astros are very difficult to strike out. Dalton Jeffries is a very big no. I'm targeting with Red Sox bats. I think they're going to be under-owned. And then Dakota Hudson and Trevor Williams at the bottom of the board here, not really playable. The Marlins are going to be popular against Hudson for good cause. He's terrible, and I think the Rangers are going to be popular against Trevor Williams. I like them a lot. I do think there's maybe, between all the cheapo pitchers, if somebody just went, if you were looking for, let's say, 6 innings, 4 runs allowed, 5 strikeouts, and like an okay performance with like 8 hits given up, Trevor Williams is maybe on that list because there is a little bit of production over time. None of it is good. It's all low strikeout. There's no ceiling at all for the 63. What I'm saying, I guess, is maybe he outperforms Dakota Hudson, Dalton Jeffries, Tristan McKenzie, and Roderick Munoz. It's not a good bottom of the board. Every single one of these value pitchers could completely go kablooey. Luis Gil, most particularly, at 78, at the highest value price. It's problematic. Home run board, then we're out of here. Jordan Alvarez, top of the board overall. Also, doesn't exactly bode well for his opponent in Cleveland. Corey Seager, as I said, made him the home run pick before realizing how popular he was, but there it is, second overall on the board. You also get Adolis Garcia at 10.93. You've got Marcus Semien right there at 10.68. A lot of love for the Texas Rangers stack. Even Wyatt Langford down here at 8.24 is kind of interesting. A lot of good Texas options today. They're going to be super popular, but very good reason to be. And I think there's enough spots to mix it up where you can get there. Nathaniel Lowe is another player that I just want to mention again, just because of how cheap Nathaniel Lowe is. Not going to be on the home run board necessarily, but a very good bat for very cheap prices. Oh, actually, he's right there. Is everybody on the board? Am I sorted out by something? Just looks like a limited. I guess it's just short at the top, like I said before. So that drives that point home. Only 7 guys above the magic number. Those are Alvarez, Seager, Alonso, Devers, Garcia, Semien, Ohtani, and then Kyle Tucker right there, Jorge Soler right there, Chris Morel a little bit below, Judge at a 9, and then everybody else dipping below that. So weak night for power, but certainly plays certainly the opportunity for plenty of these players to go off a little bit for power as well against some pretty weak pitchers. Red Sox, Rangers, Astros, like all 3 of those spots for bats. Yankees as a wildly contrarian dice roll against an excellent pitcher. Again, just to round that point off one last time, when we're talking about just crazy contrarian plays, a lot of times that's better to do. Let me get to the Yankees. Let me get to the Dodgers if they were going to be low owned, rather than like, all right, this team's really low owned, even if they're facing a bad pitcher, because they're really bad. Right? I like to get my contrarian plays from good teams when I can. So even against Corbin Burns, it puts the Yanks on the board a little bit. And if they manage to chase him with a few runs early, then could be off and running. But again, very, very bad spot. Understand how we're putting that one. All right, with that in mind, guys, I got to get out of here. Check out acemind.io for your sim and optimizer needs. Our pals over at AceMind. acemind.io. Your first 3 days over there are always free. All the major sports for DFS. Optimizer and the sim. If you use promo code rotoscouts all in caps, you get 20% off your first month once you decide to buy the product. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe. I put a fresh link in Discord into the description here, so use that if you're not in our Discord yet and jump into the Discord and hang out with us. With that in mind, guys, good luck out there. Somebody go win something. See you tomorrow.